In the opening scene, Frieren, the buzzkill, is riding back to the royal capital with her buddies, Himmel, Hyder, and Eisen, while reading a spellbook after finally taking down the Demon King they've been chasing for 10 years. As the capital walls pop up on the horizon, Himmel and the crew call Frieren out of her bubble so she can check out the awesome walls and talk about what's next since they're all retiring. But Free, who doesn't even realize time has passed, just brushes off the walls and chats away with her friends, who are kind of nervous about what's coming next. They wind up laughing and joking like true pals do. Before long, they pull into the royal capital, and the whole city treats them like the heroes they are. Shortly after, they meet the king, who thanks them for defeating the Demon King and bringing peace back to the kingdom. After that, the heroes kick back until night to enjoy the festival thrown in their honor. When night falls, Himmel and Eisen take their sweet time enjoying the city's tasty treats, while Hyder, who's a priest, drinks like there's no tomorrow. Himmel soon finds Frieren moping around and tells her to lighten up and celebrate since the king is planning on putting up statues of them in the plaza. Frieren brushes him off and keeps waiting for the party to wrap up. About an hour later, the heroes come together to gaze at the sky and say their final goodbyes. They share a laugh, reminiscing about some embarrassing and awesome moments from their 10 years together, including some silly things Frieren did on their journey of her own, except Frieren cracks up. Once the laughing dies down, Himmel thanks everyone for making the last decade fun, but Frieren, the party pooper, kills the vibe by pointing out that it was just 10 years and not a big deal. Knowing how spoiled and rude Frieren can be, Himmel ignores her and turns back with his friends to watch the Era meteor shower, which is said to happen only once every 50 years. While they're soaking in this once-in-a-lifetime sight, Frieren brings the mood down again by saying the view isn't that great from the city. To try to help him, she promises to take him to a better spot in 50 years, so they can see the meteor shower more clearly if he's still around by then. Himmel nods and keeps watching. The next morning, Frieren takes off from the royal capital to keep searching the edges of the continent for more spells and stuff. Even though Himmel and the others still don't get how she sees time, they wish her well. Days turn into weeks, months, and years as Frieren continues her exploration. Over time, she gathers so much knowledge and experience that she decides it's time for a break. After 50 years of wandering and collecting spells, she finally feels like resting. One day, Frieren stops by a local magic and antique shop to buy a shadow dragon's horn. Unfortunately, she finds out they don't have any. Suddenly, she remembers one they got from the Demon King's castle back in the day and recalls that she asked Himmel to keep it. With the meteor shower coming in a few weeks, Frieren remembers her promise to Himmel and plans to deliver after getting the dragon's horn. After traveling for almost a month, Frieren finally makes it to the city. As she walks around, she notices all the changes they've made to the place. While searching the streets for Himmel, she finally spots him. Unfortunately, the Himmel she finds isn't the one she expected. After 50 years away from the city, he's aged a lot and is now pretty weak. Frieren quickly asks about the horn she came for, and Himmel tells her it's been stashed in his cabinet the whole time. She scolds him for hiding something so bad in his room, but he brushes it off and hands her the horn, which she doesn't think much of. Once she has it, Frieren sends it back home using her magic bird and takes a moment to check out the statues they had made of them back in the day. After enjoying the view, she goes back inside and convinces Himmel to pack up so they can see the Era meteor shower one last time. They head out and run into Eisen, the dwarf, and Hyder, who's now a full-on bishop, hanging out by the city gates. After a warm reunion, Frieren takes them on a week-long trek to the spot she promised to show them 50 years ago. Along the way, they relive old memories and get into all sorts of adventures. When they reach the spot, they all lie back on the soft grass and enjoy the meteor shower together one last time. Himmel thanks Frieren for sticking to her promise and letting him have one last fun time with his friends before he passes away, and a few months later, he finally succumbs to old age. At his funeral, Frieren stands with Eisen and Hyder as they watch the ceremony. While the city's folks pay their respects to the hero, they can't help but notice how expressionless Frieren looks and call her fake. When it's time to bury Himmel, Frieren finally breaks down, realizing how clueless she had been for not taking the time to really know him before he died. An hour after they bury him, Hyder hops on a carriage to head back to the Holy City. Before he leaves, he says goodbye to Frieren, almost like he knows it's the last time they'll see each other, and asks her to have a drink at his grave whenever she comes to visit. Frieren asks if he's afraid of death, and the priest says he's not worried since they'll all be together in heaven. Once he's gone, Frieren turns to Eisen and tries to ask him to be her bodyguard. Sadly, Eisen is getting old too and tells her he's not really available for that anymore. Frieren feels a bit down, but then she smiles at Eisen for being such a good friend. With everything said and done, she heads off for her next adventure. 20 years later, Frieren heads to the edge of the Holy City to see Hyder. After getting lost in the woods for like the 100th time, she finally runs into a little girl with purple hair. The girl seems nice and asks Frieren what she's doing in the forest. Frieren tells her she's looking for a guy named Hyder, and the purple-haired girl takes her to the cabin where the priest lives. There, Frieren finds her old buddy, who's now got a face full of gray hair, and they share some laughs before settling down for tea. When things get serious, Hyder introduces the girl as Fern, a war orphan he saved a while back. When he asks why she's visiting, Frieren says it's to repay her debts to him before he passes away. Hyder scoffs and asks her for a favor. When Frieren agrees, he tells her to take Fern on as an apprentice, since she's pretty good with magic. Frieren immediately says no because she worries Fern will just get stronger and then end up dying later on. Moving on, Hyder asks her for another favor. This time, he takes her to his library and pulls out a secret grimoire from Ewig the Sage. He wants her help to decode it because it's said to hold lost spells for living forever and bringing people back to life. Frieren opens the book and complains about how cheesy it all is. When she finally gets serious, she asks Hyder why he wants to study the grimoire if he doesn't fear death. Hyder admits he was just putting on a brave face before and that he's actually scared of dying. Frieren scolds him and tells him to give her 5 or 6 years to figure it all out. While she's at it, Hyder asks her to teach Fern some magic too. So, Frieren heads back into the woods and finds Fern standing at the edge of a cliff, staring at a big rock on the other side of the mountain. Frieren notices how well the little girl controls her magic, and sees a lot of potential in her. Fern shows off her skills by shooting a magic beam at the rock, but unfortunately, she misses. She gets a bit confused, and asks Frieren what she needs to do to get way stronger. Frieren starts by asking her if she really loves magic. When Fern says yes, Frieren smiles and begins her magic lessons with Fern. In her first lesson, Frieren sits by the river with Fern and talks about magic control and mana strength, explaining that Fern's got a long way to go before she can boost her mana levels. When Frieren sees Fern looking discouraged, she reassures her that her magic control is impressive, especially for someone her age. Fern appreciates the compliments and tries to move on. Over the next few years, Frieren works on understanding the Ewig grimoire while helping Fern improve her magic skills. Fern practices hard every day, aiming to build up her strength and mana reserves to complete her mission. One day, an old and frail Hyder finds Frieren in the library studying the grimoire. He asks about Fern's progress, and Frieren tells him that while Fern is working hard, she still has a long way to go before she can be considered a real mage. Suddenly, Hyder collapses and wakes up hours later in bed. Frieren, unfazed, tells him she's going to decode the grimoire faster to help him in her own way. To do that, she reaches out to Fern, asking her to take a break from training so she can be with Hyder during his final moments. When she finds Fern at her usual cliff training hard, she tells her to stop and be with her master. Fern gets upset and shares how Hyder saved her when she was at her lowest, about to end her life after losing her village and family. Hyder's words back then gave her hope, and now she wants to honor him by becoming a great mage or learning a new skill before he passes away. After listening to her, Frieren lets Fern continue her training and goes back to decoding the grimoire for the following weeks. Fern keeps practicing until she feels ready to try again. Eventually, Frieren finishes interpreting the entire grimoire, only to find there's no spell for immortality or resurrection, which Hyder had actually suspected. He remains calm, hoping for a peaceful end. Hours before he dies, Hyder asks Frieren to update him on Fern's progress. She tells him Fern is doing well, and Hyder encourages her to take Fern on as her new apprentice since Fern is strong enough to help fight alongside her. Frieren feels she must honor her old friend's dying wish. Before she leaves, Hyder tells her to grab her payment from somewhere in the house and leave before nightfall, fearing he might die that day. Frieren asks Hyder to bid Fern a proper goodbye so she doesn't feel abandoned. Hyder, impressed with Fern, calls her a kind girl. As Frieren heads out, she asks him why he saved Fern in the first place. He thinks for a bit and finally says it's what Himmel would have done. After that, Frieren visits the cliff and sees that Fern has already finished her task. Later, she stops by Hyder's grave and pours 2 bottles of booze on it to honor him. After attending the funeral rites, she leaves with her new apprentice, Fern. In the next scene, Fern and her master, Frieren, help an old farmer harvest pumpkins using magic and get a scroll with folk magic recipes for warming tea. Fern questions the strange way they get paid and asks Frieren why she doesn't just collect money instead. Frieren explains it's her thing and helps her feel connected. On their next trip to town, they run into a herbalist who takes them to the forest to check out the sad state of the hero Himmel's statue. The woman remembers Himmel fondly because he saved her when she was younger from a demon attacking their village. So, she feels bad for Himmel having such a messed up image. Frieren, the elven mage, then tells her it's what he deserves since he caused a lot of trouble while the statue was being made. The woman is a bit thrown off by Frieren's comments but lets her get to work cleaning the statue. Once they're done, the woman looks at the dull grass around the statue and wishes it was more colorful. Since Frieren can use magic to grow flowers, she decides to spice up the area with some pretty blooms, but she picks blue moon weed flowers, which she has never seen before. Fern asks why she chose those, and Frieren says it's because they grow in Himmel's town. To bring these flowers to life, Frieren needs to see a picture of them first. Luckily, the herbalist has a list, so she takes the girls back to her place to show them a photo of the weed flower. After seeing what they look like, Frieren decides to go find some so she can create them. She tells Fern to get ready, but then Fern is caught hiding some seed rats from her. After chatting a bit, they let the rats go into the forest and talk about finding and studying the blue moon flowers so they can cast spells to make them. Fern is cool with this, so they hit the road, following every lead they get to find the blue moon weed flowers. After exploring a bunch of nearby villages for 6 whole months without any luck, the girls finally decide it's time to switch things up. This time, they need to go back to the herbalist in the village for a few more tips. The herbalist is totally excited about their long search, but Frieren thinks it didn't take that long at all. When the herbalist asks Fern how it's going, Fern just says no and complains about Frieren's wild obsession with magic. After listening to Fern vent, the herbalist laughs and gives her a small pouch while encouraging her to share her feelings with Frieren. In the next scene, Fern talks to the smiling herbalist before showing her the small pouch of medicinal flowers the herbalist suggested they plant instead. While they're chatting, a seed rat snatches their pouch of seeds and bolts into the woods. Frieren and Fern carefully follow the seed rat, putting their chat on hold until they find their main hideout. On the way, Frieren brings up Fern's strange obsession again, and Frieren says it's just because she loves magic. After some memory digging, Frieren and Fern finally figure out where the seed rats have been stashing their stuff over time. When they reach the base of the tower, they spot petals from a familiar blue flower. Frieren then floats up to the top of the tower and finds a wild patch of blue moon weed flowers. She remembers what Himmel said about how beautiful they were, and now that she sees them, she couldn't be more thrilled. Fern shows up wanting to know why Frieren is so into magic. Frieren eventually gives her some scenarios until she gets it. A few days later, they return to the statue and plant the weed flowers around it, with the herbalist there too. After some more small talk, Frieren places a flower crown on Himmel's head and wishes her friend a well-deserved and peaceful afterlife. A few months later, Frieren and her apprentice are off to another town to look for spells. When they get there, Fern starts talking to her master about splitting the bills and grabbing the essentials to survive. After listing what they need, Fern suddenly remembers all the junk her master has blown their hard-earned cash on before, with the only smart purchase being a book about magical history or something like that. They hit an intersection where Frieren splits from her apprentice to go get her stuff. Worried about wasting money again, Fern tailgates her all over town until they reach an accessory shop, where Fern feels lost. She ducks behind a fountain and notices the weird look on her master's face. Just as she's trying to figure it out, a stray cat comes over to say hi. After giving the cat some love, Fern looks up again and sees her master paying for whatever's in the small box she's holding. Staying hidden, she follows Frieren into a rougher part of town and watches her asking a local dude for a spot that sells good sweets and desserts. Fern is surprised when Frieren gets treated way more politely than she expected. The guys point her to a popular dessert place and then walk her out. Fern keeps trailing her master until she remembers she hasn't finished her shopping yet. Later that night, Fern gets to the inn and finds Frieren already there. She apologizes for being late and settles in quickly. Soon after, Frieren asks her out for dessert, and Fern hesitantly agrees. When they reach the outdoor dessert shop, they enjoy the beautiful view, and Frieren tells her to pick whatever she wants since she's been saving up for this. Fern brings up Frieren's favorite treat, Merker pudding, which jogs her memory of hanging out with the guys back when they were younger. Back then, Frieren was kind of bummed out for not knowing about their favorite foods, so they filled her in. Moving on, Frieren pulls out the box from earlier and hands it to Fern, who suddenly realizes it's her birthday. Fern opens the box to find a gorgeous hair ornament. She thanks Frieren for the gift and for trying to get to know her better. The next day, Frieren and Fern rise up to hit the road for their next adventure. On the way, Fern asks what to expect from this journey, and Frieren mentions she's looking to relive the adventures she had with Himmel and the others, so they don't just fade away in her memory. Hearing this, Fern smiles, because this is the first time Frieren said something that made sense to her. She makes fun of her master for a bit before getting quiet and continuing their journey. When they reach an old patch of land, Frieren decides it's time to teach Fern some defensive magic lessons. After sizing up her battle skills, Frieren cranks up the difficulty and hits her with a 360 attack. Even though Fern ends up taking some hits in training, she still learns a thing or two from her master. After a day of training, the duo hit the road again. While making their way to their destination, they chat about defensive magic and the best times to use it. From the way Fern talks about magic, Frieren realizes her student hasn't read the magical history book. She calls her a slowpoke for slacking on her studies. Fern takes it in stride and keeps going with her master. Eventually, they reach the next village, where Frieren runs into a familiar face who takes her to see where the Elder Sage of Corruption, Qual, was sealed. For some context, Qual is a demon who caused chaos 80 years back before the hero Himmel and his gang sealed him away. Frieren knows the seal has likely weakened over the years, so she's there to finish off the demon for good. As they move along, the old man tells Frieren that Himmel used to visit the village every year to check on the seal, but stopped about 30 years ago. During those visits, he would call Frieren a bad person for never visiting him. Luckily, Frieren remembered the seal, and she's back to keep her promise and take down the monster. When they arrive at the seal, Frieren senses it's unstable, so she decides to rest for the night and come back the next day to tackle Qual. That night, Fern asks her master why she sealed Qual instead of just getting rid of him back then. Frieren replies it was because he was way too strong to beat. Even as a demon, Qual was feared by humans as a powerful magician. Tons of spells he created back then are still in use today, and they owe that to him. After pulling up some wild stats about how strong the demon is, Fern gets freaked out and asks her master if she can handle such a foe. Frieren just gets up and asks if Fern really read the magic book. At this point, Fern gulps and admits no. Not wanting to waste more energy chatting, Frieren hits the hay to prepare for the big day. The next day, Frieren and Fern stroll up to the demon seal, all geared up for a fight. When it's time, Frieren dispels the seal and brings the demon back to life. In the first moments of being alive again, Qual reminisces about the good old days with his sealer, Frieren, and inquires about the Demon King. When he learns Frieren took out his Demon King, Qual decides to get revenge. He stretches out his hand and casts the only destructive spell he knows, Zoltrak. But this time, he's shocked to see Fern block the attack. While he wonders how she managed to block the strongest spell he ever created, Frieren explains how much humans have studied his spell over the decades to develop new spells that counter such strong attacks. Now, Zoltrak is just a regular offensive spell that doesn't scare any mage. With that, Qual examines the defensive spell and realizes it must use a ton of mana. All he needs to do is ramp up his attacks and wear them out. On his next move, Frieren tells Fern to remember her practice and defend her while she does something sneaky. For the next few minutes, Qual focuses all his attacking powers on Fern, who blocks each one like a champ. What he doesn't realize is that Frieren is already cooking up something special for him. By the time he notices, it's too late as she unleashes her own attack magic and wipes him out. Qual is instantly just a memory, and Frieren returns to the village to share the good news. There, she spots a weird hat and remembers the old man as the kid who flipped her skirt up years ago. Time flies, she chuckles, finding it funny how humans go about their lives. After getting their reward, she and Fern ride off to the next town, chatting like old friends and enjoying the view along the way. About a year later, Frieren and Fern hit up the Graz channel in the Central Lands to do some work and grab some folk magic before they keep on traveling. After a few days of exploring the area, they finally get to chat with this old dude who takes them to a polluted beach and asks for their help to clean it up. In return, he offers them a fake book that he claims was written by Flam, the legendary mage. Frieren checks it out and asks if that's the only grimoire in their village. When the guy says yes, she decides to help him clean the beach anyway. Fern asks her why she took the job, and Frieren says it's because she wanted to do it for herself. With that, they get to work. A few months later, during the cold winter, Fern is seen heading out one morning to grab some food from a local store. When she gets back to their inn room, she gets grossed out at how messy it is. Turns out, she cleaned up the place yesterday, but somehow Frieren totally wrecked it while sleeping. Annoyed with Frieren's laziness, she snatches the book from Frieren's face and wakes her up. After getting her dressed, Fern pushes her to the beach to continue their work. After making some good progress, Fern stops to ask if Frieren's always been this late and annoying. Frieren apologizes and admits she's never been a morning person. Fern then asks if she ever got in trouble because of it, and Frieren says she did once. They carry on piling up the wood, and when they're done, they burn it and sit down for dinner that night. Their employer asks about their progress, and Frieren says they're almost finished. The guy politely asks if they can speed things up so they can wrap it up before New Year's festival, so they can all see the sunrise on the big day. Frieren just ignores him and keeps eating her food. The next morning while working, Fern asks Frieren if she's ever seen a sunrise before. Frieren says she's not really into sunrises and all that. To dodge more questions, she rushes through the work so they can finish up quickly. Over the following weeks, they hustle to get as much done as they can to clear the debris before New Year. After hours of hauling and burning dirt, they finally finish the job. Then, on New Year's Eve, they test the water quality until they confirm the work is done. That evening, the man visits them and makes Frieren promise to be there for the sunrise the next day. On the way back to the inn, Fern asks how Frieren is going to wake up so early, and she says she'll just stay up all night and crash right after seeing the sunrise. That night, Frieren reminisces, thinking about her friends from back in the day when they were younger. Very early the next morning, Fern wakes up to find Frieren still asleep. Before the sun comes up, she drags her master to the popular spot to see the sunrise, and makes her stand by the railings. Luckily, the sun is a gorgeous yellowish red over the sea and the town, but Frieren gets bored pretty quick and asks Fern to take her back. However, Fern points out that Frieren seems to be having a good time since she's been smiling the whole time. Realizing Fern is right, Frieren sticks around a little longer. Soon after, she remembers another moment with her friends when they visited Eason's family graves. At the graveyard, Hyder the priest kneels to pray for the souls who passed, wishing them safe passage to heaven. Back then, Eisen didn't believe in heaven and argued against it. Thankfully, the priest managed to convince both Eisen and Himmel to accept the company comfort that comes with believing in heaven. Nearly 30 years later, Frieren shows up at the same spot with her apprentice and sees an old, wrinkly Eisen praying for the same people again. She stops when she spots the dwarf and asks to hang out. Even though she's kind of rude, Eisen still invites Frieren and her apprentice in. Over some tea, Frieren asks Eisen what he needs so she can help him out. Eisen tells her he's been writing to Heider these past few years, so he knows Frieren asked Heider the same thing ages ago before he kicked the bucket. Frieren pretends to be surprised, and Eisen points out she didn't know this because she never bothered to learn more about them. After some small talk, Eisen takes Frieren to Vol Basin, a place she visited long ago. When they arrive, Frieren asks why he brought her there, and he says it's so she can help him find the real grimoire of the legendary mage, Flam. Frieren fires off a few questions and soon figures out that Heider has been making steady progress in his search for the real deal. They find themselves in a thick forest where the Viking dwarf tells them to scout for a big tree. After tossing around some random ideas, they finally get serious about looking for the tree. This time, Frieren thinks about Fern's feelings and encourages Eisen to hurry up so Fern doesn't get too mad at her, which makes Eisen chuckle a bit. A few weeks into their tree search, they finally get some leads. While chasing their clue, Frieren asks Eisen why he's so determined to find the grimoire. Eisen says it's because he feels bad for her. When she asks him to explain, Eisen remembers how sad she was at Himmel's funeral when she kept wishing she'd known him better. So, to help her connect with Himmel's spirit, he's going to dig up Flam's notes and figure out how to talk to the dead, since Flam wrote the process down. Frieren tells Eisen she doesn't care about seeing Himmel anymore and that those texts are just fairy tales. Eisen laughs and tells her that all magic started as fairy tales too, so there's nothing to worry about. Besides, he's already talked things over with Heider. They came up with the plan together. The best she can do now is respect the plan. When they reach the big tree, Frieren gets close and remembers when Flam planted it. That was 1,000 years ago when Frieren was still a teenager. On that day, Flam planted the tree to keep her knowledge book hidden from nosy people. Before she left, she told Frieren that someday she'd want to come back for the book. Now that she's there, Frieren uses her magic to lift the shield so she can get into the room behind the big tree. Fern is a little shocked to see Frieren act so familiar with the place, but when Eisen tells her that Frieren was Flam's student, she keeps quiet. When she checks out the book, she finds a place called Oriole, located at the very north of the continent. Flam mentioned that she talked to the souls of some old friends there and wished Frieren could see it too. Fern gets curious and asks her master to find out where it is. Frieren checks it out and discovers it's in Ende, the same place where the Demon King's castle is. At first, Frieren feels hesitant about going there, but Eisen asks her to promise to visit so she can chat with Himmel. After everything is settled, Frieren and Eisen head out to the Demon King's castle. On the way, Frieren falls asleep and starts mumbling about how cold the northern parts are. Fern gets worried and asks Eisen to explain what happened to make her master so scared. Eisen tells Fern that the far north is still super cold, so they need to be ready. Fern stays quiet and keeps going until she gets annoyed with Frieren's laziness. Eisen then asks Fern how Frieren is as a master, and Fern spills all the quirky stuff she's seen on their journey together. In the end, she calls Frieren a strange person who doesn't seem to enjoy anything much. After hearing Fern's take on Frieren, Eisen remembers when they first saw a meteor shower. Before Heider interrupted the bummer chat, Himmel and Eisen were trying to get Frieren to take on an apprentice to make traveling less boring for her. Eventually, Eisen thinks Frieren would make a good master before they head back to his place to chill. After saying goodbye to the old dwarf, Eisen wishes Frieren good luck on her journey since it'll take a while. Frieren takes a moment to think about the last time she was at a place like this. Once she's done, she turns to Fern and tells her that their journey will only take 10 years. As they start their journey, Fern remembers the last time she had a long chat with Heider before he passed away. Back then, Heider was trying to get Fern to behave while she was under Free's guidance, saying he would haunt her if she didn't. Once Fern figured out his tricks, she clapped back and made him laugh. As that nice memory fades away, Fern wakes up to find herself resting on Frieren's shoulders. Frieren, noticing her apprentice is awake, tells her to stay alert because they're about to arrive at their next stop, the Willy region in the Central Lands. Fern gets ready, and soon they reach the town to relax. A few minutes later, they pop into a shop to grab some supplies. The woman running the store warns them about the creepy ghosts wandering the mountain pass they need to go through once they leave town. Frieren gets curious and asks for more details about the ghosts, thinking they might just be undead monsters or something. The woman suggests asking people in town for more info. Before heading back to the inn, Frieren asks locals about the ghosts in the mountain pass. Their research reveals that these ghosts are the spirits of loved ones trying desperately to reconnect with the living. When they get to the inn, Frieren explains how the undead work, telling Fern they're just corpses brought to life by magic. But this time, these ghosts don't look like typical undead. Once they're in their room, Frieren seems scared about what the monster might look like and tells Fern to try to forget about figuring it out. Before bed, Frieren plans to leave the village the next day, but Fern convinces her to stick around and help out. The next morning, the two head to the mountain pass to check out the ghost sightings. When they reach the area where villagers have been disappearing, Fern goes on high alert and warns her master about the illusion monsters used to trap people. Frieren recognizes a particular monster that's good at using such magic and calls its name Einsam. This greedy, crafty monster only eats humans by creating phantoms that look like their dead relatives to lure them in and devour them. Thankfully, mages have no trouble with this monster since high mana spells can take it out. Frieren asks Fern if she can really shoot a phantom of someone like Hyder and not feel guilty. Fern assures her not to worry about her, so they keep moving. Soon, the atmosphere turns foggy and dark. Fern and Frieren get ready for any phantoms that might show up. Moments later, Hyder's apparition appears behind Fern and calls her name. Fern turns to see his ghost, but just before she can shoot, Hyder says some sweet things from a precious memory Fern cherishes, causing her to freeze and listen to his sweet talk. Frieren realizes what's going on and prepares to take Hyder out herself. Just then, Himmel shows up too. Unfazed by the ghostly figure, Frieren asks Himmel to say what he needs to say, and he tells her to shoot him. So, Frieren shoots him without a second thought, which nudges Fern to do the same. When they're finally done shooting, Fern breaks down a little as she snaps back to reality. Frieren tells her to stay calm so she can face the real Hyder when they get to Oriole. With this, Fern gathers herself and continues following her master. After traveling for a few more hours, the duo finally arrived at Regal Canyon, located in the Central Lands. They hid from sight when they noticed a red fire dragon sleeping in its nest. Frieren checked out the pile of junk the wild dragon had stolen from previous adventurers, but then she spotted a grimoire and instantly got really interested in getting it. To do that, though, they'd have to deal with the dragon first. For their first attempt, Frieren had Fern attack the dragon with a regular offensive spell. When it didn't work and the dragon woke up, she bailed on Fern, leaving her to face the dragon alone. It didn't take long for Fern to realize how dangerous the dragon was, so she took off and met up with her master in a safer spot. After thinking it over, they decided they'd need a buddy. That night, they headed back to Eisen and talked things over with him. Eisen told them to look for his former apprentice, Stark, who now lived in a village near the canyon. Frieren asked Eisen if Stark was a good warrior, but Eisen kept quiet. The next day, they finally made it to the village and searched quietly for the guy. Somewhere along the way, Fern asked about the grimoire in the dragon's nest, and Frieren said it had a spell that could see through people's clothes. As they argued about how useful that spell was, an old lady showed up and told them that Stark was looking for them. On their way to Stark's hideout, the woman shared the backstory of Stark, the hero. Turns out, the dragon attacked the village 3 years ago and left after a long showdown with Stark, who just seemed to come out of nowhere. After hearing such a brave story, Frieren and Fern felt optimistic about Stark. When they finally got to his training area, they approached the lively redhead who tried to show off the scar he got from an earlier fight. Once he learned Frieren's identity, he got serious and asked if his master sent them to bring him back. Frieren explained that she needed his help as their frontliner to take down the fiery red dragon together. Before agreeing, Stark asked Frieren why she wanted that grimoire so much. Frieren told him it was because a friend complimented the spells she had, so that's why she wanted it. After hearing all that crazy stuff she just said, Stark finally agreed to help, but then asked Frieren if she could handle the dragon. Frieren replied that if he could keep the dragon busy for 30 seconds, she could whip up a spell strong enough to take it down. Stark then asked why he had to do that. At this point, Frieren just asked him if he had any experience fighting monsters. Stark then dropped the tough guy act and broke down in tears, begging Frieren to save his sorry life. According to him, he got super lucky 3 years ago when he froze until the dragon took off. Not long after that, the villagers decided to celebrate him and call him a hero. Fern was totally grossed out by his big display of cowardice and asked her master to ditch this guy, but Frieren just walked forward to check out the crack in the mountain behind Stark. After feeling it for a bit, she left and told Stark to get it together. Later that night, Frieren and Fern talked about Stark's heroism with the pub owners. When Fern got cocky with her comments, Frieren reminded her how pathetic she was during her first fight with monsters. Fern shut up and finished her food quickly. Soon after, Frieren headed to the inn and urged Fern to check on the idiot before going to bed. As Fern made her way there, Frieren recalled her meeting with Eisen weeks before and finally figured out Stark's backstory. Meanwhile, Fern arrived at Stark's training area only to find him working on the crack in the mountain as he continued his training. She called him out in disbelief, and Stark looked back at her. When she finally comes to her senses, she asks the guy why he's training so hard when he's dead set against fighting the dragon. Stark starts rambling, telling Fern he's just putting on a show because the villagers think just having him there is what's keeping the dragon away. Fern questions him about what he'll do if the dragon actually attacks the village, and Stark admits he'd have to defend it when that happens, but he also hints that he might just run away. He mentions the scar on his forehead is from his master, not the dragon, when Eisen was disappointed with him. Fern takes his rough hand and tells him she believes he'll stick around if the dragon attacks. Stark gets a bit awkward and asks if she's being cheesy. Fern explains her first encounter with a monster, saying that when it came time to fight, She was terrified at first and just ran. Eventually, she found her courage and took down the monster pretty quickly. She tells Stark that his determination to protect the village is real and strong enough to take on even 10 big dragons if it means keeping them safe. After she leaves, Stark thinks about what she said and solidifies his own determination. Fern returns to the inn and shares what happened with Stark with her master. The next day, they head back to Stark's training spot but are bummed when he's not there. After trying to get Fern to play tag with the dragon, Stark finally shows up ready to get to work. Before the fight, Frieren asks him why he cares so much about the village. Stark replies he's grown to like the people there over the last 3 years and would do anything to protect them. Once they reach the dragon's nest, Frieren sees Stark's hands shaking and chuckles a little. When Stark makes a fuss about it, she tells him she's laughing because that's how his master used to feel before facing any big opponent. With that, Stark moves forward and stands in front of the dragon, unsure of what to do. He knows he needs to keep the monster busy for 30 seconds, so he gathers his nerves to face the dragon. As he gets closer, he realizes something about his master. It's okay to be scared, as long as you have the guts to face your fears. Soon, the battle starts, and Frieren begins to see why Eisen had hit Stark back then. It turns out Eisen wasn't disappointed or mad at Stark. He was just scared of how much power Stark had, so much that he instinctively attacked young Stark out of fear. Eisen sees how strong Stark could become in the future and starts feeling really optimistic about his growth. Now in the midst of the battle, Stark does everything he can to defend against the dragon's attacks. When he gets the upper hand, he makes a powerful strike that takes the dragon down. With 30 seconds gone, Stark yells at Frieren to attack the dragon, but Frieren, who already knows the dragon is done for, just tells him after he hurls enough insults her way. A few minutes later, the girls show up and thank Stark for taking care of the dragon. Soon after, Frieren and her apprentice check out the huge pile of junk the dragon left behind. Stark talks about what his master said about the elf digging through the trash in front of them. Frieren remembers the night she made shaved ice with a magic trick to impress her travel buddies. Eisen didn't see the point of such a silly stunt, but the hero Himmel thought otherwise. The next day, Stark says goodbye to the village and heads out with the girls after they get their gifts for taking down the dragon. After walking a bit, they stop to use the spell from the grimoire. Fern gets a bit cheeky checking out Stark's nuts, but is let down when she sees how small they are. Eventually, they ask Stark what he plans to do next, and he says he'll travel with them. After a few more days on the road, they finally hit the fortress city of Wall. When they arrive, they meet this huge guardian at the northern checkpoint who won't let them through, saying it's too dangerous on the other side. He's called away to the Castellan's house, and before he leaves, he tells Frieren and the kids to be careful and behave. Once he's gone, Frieren and the others check out the town and hang out until they can figure out how to get through the checkpoint, which might take a couple of years. Stark and Fern share confused looks at Frieren being so chill about it. When she goes off to do her thing, the two decide to explore the city. Stark heads to the nearest eatery to grab some tasty jumbo snacks, which he complains about. Soon after, Fern comes in and sits near him after ordering a glass of milk. Stark asks why she looks so annoyed, and Fern flips the script, asking if he's cool with waiting 2 more years just to get through the checkpoint. When Stark says no, she tells him to come with her so they can find an easier way out of town. Outside, Stark suggests they fly over the tall wall, but sadly, there's a barrier blocking that idea. Over the next few scenes, they ask villagers and locals for any tips. When they get nothing, Fern gives up, but not Stark. He tells her they should ask the black market folks for info about the checkpoint gates. Fern jumps on board with this plan and starts asking every shady character they meet in the city's underbelly. After hours of begging for help, they still get zipped. Stark decides to hit up the guard station, feeling like he's got nothing to lose. Before they go, Fern asks why he's so desperate to get past the checkpoint. Stark explains he doesn't have much time. Fern asks why, and Stark says he needs to get back to share crazy stories from his adventures with Fern and Frieren with his old, frail master. He thinks that's the only way to pay back his master for taking care of him, and if he takes too long, Eisen could die before he gets to say thank you. Fern thinks about this for a second and gets back to searching. After wandering around for a few more hours, Fern finally spots Frieren trying to keep a low profile. Stark starts grilling her, thinking she's gotten into trouble again. This time, Frieren says she was just shopping and they started following her. Just then, the guard shows up again and kneels to apologize to Frieren for being rude earlier. Then, the Castellan shows up to pay his respects. Turns out the village really respects the elf, so they let her pass through the checkpoint without any hassle to get to the northern lands. Next, the villagers line up to see Frieren, and even though she's not into the special treatment, she has to go along with it. As they leave the village for the north, Frieren wishes she had more time to learn about the village's magic. During their travels to their first town in the northern lands, Frieren finds herself dreaming about her time with the heroes during their 10-year adventure. Back then, Frieren had just gotten a copycat grimoire from the legendary mage Flam and was complaining about how wild people can get when they're trying to scam others. After dreaming for a few hours, she wakes up to find her buddies, Fern and Stark, getting breakfast ready for all 3 of them. Fern notices right away that her master is awake, and she's shocked that Frieren woke up so early. Before Frieren can go back to sleep, Fern quickly massages her and feeds her some breakfast, so that Frieren will be wide awake and they can hit the road to the first settlement in the northern lands. When they reach Ing Road, the pathway to the nearest town is blocked by a landslide, so Frieren and her crew stop to help clear it. A traveler who asks for their help stands by, thanking them profusely for pitching in. At one point, Stark gets tired and asks Frieren why they didn't just use magic to get the man's caravan across the landslide. Frieren explains that if they did that, other travelers could get stuck just like this guy. Stark gets the idea and keeps quiet until they're halfway done clearing the rocks. When they ask the man why landslides happen there, the old guy says it's because of all the constant wars with demons. Stark nods in agreement and starts teasing Fern, who keeps calling him Mr. Stark. After their little back and forth, they finish the job and follow the old man to his town, where they can rest for a few days. On the way, the old man is amazed to find out Frieren is an elf, since he's never seen one before. There, Frieren explains how her kind feels indifferent about having kids and loves being alone. When they reach the town gates, they find it buzzing with activity. The old man tells them the town is gearing up for the Liberation Festival, celebrating the day Himmel and his crew of heroes defeated the Demon King. Frieren isn't too keen on revealing her identity, so she keeps firing off strange questions about the festival. Eventually, she remembers another moment with Himmel acting like a jerk and explains why he liked having statues made in their honor. Back then, she didn't care about them, but Himmel wanted them up so Frieren wouldn't feel so lonely when they were gone. That night, Frieren and her buddies get to see the statues the town decorated so nicely in their honor. After talking about traditions and stuff, they crash for the night and leave town the next day. Before they get too far, Stark asks Frieren where they're headed, and she replies, "Heaven." Stark just goes quiet after that. A few weeks later, the trio arrives in Graf Granat's territory, which is also in the northern lands. For a little while, Frieren thinks the town seems normal until she senses something off demon magic. Out of nowhere, she readies her staff and aims it towards the demon magic. Right then, 3 demons appear through the gate up ahead, alongside Graf Granat, and Frieren gets ready to take one out. Luckily, the guards manage to stop her before she does anything. Soon, Graf and the so-called demon peace envoy, Lord Lugner, approach to check out this phony. Lugner asks Graf to confirm he didn't send an assassin after him. Granat assures him that Frieren is acting solo. Lugner believes him and turns to size up his new opponent. After some intense chatting with the mage, Graf has the guards toss Frieren into the dungeon for now. Hours later, Stark and Fern go to see their master in the dungeon. They tell her she's been sentenced to 2 years in jail, and Frieren just shrugs it off like it's no big deal. When they get to the main topic, Fern asks if she knows about Aura the Guillotine, and Frieren explains that the demon is one of the 7 sages of destruction who worked for the Demon King. Fern goes on to say that the demon has been fighting the town for ages since regaining her powers and hasn't met anyone strong enough to take her down. After years of conflict, they're there for a peace treaty. Frieren scoffs, seeing the demon's plan to take the town out from the inside. When Stark shows doubt about the demon's true intentions, Frieren decides to set him straight about how dangerous they can be. She shares a story from about 80 years ago when she was with Himmel and the others. One night, a village found and kicked out a demon child who had eaten one of the locals' daughters. When it came to killing the demon, Himmel hesitated because it was just a kid and kind of cute. Bored by the whole scene, Frieren stepped up to kill the little brat, but the village chief showed mercy and took the demon boy in, thinking he could turn it good. Unfortunately, that backfired when years later, the demon boy turned on him and killed him to replace the daughter he had earlier with the chief's daughter. When Himmel and the gang found out, they had no problem finishing the demon off. Even in his last moments, the demon tried to mess with the humans' heads, and Frieren asked why. The demon replied that humans teach them to use words as tricks. After sharing her story, Frieren explains how things really are and urges her crew to keep investigating. The next day, Lugner and his 2 sidekicks chill out, waiting for Graf Granat to arrive for their meeting. While waiting, they talk about that weird mage who popped up in town the day before. Lugner thinks he's seen her somewhere but can't quite place it. Meanwhile, Frieren senses the town's destruction coming and plans to escape prison once chaos breaks loose. When Graf finally arrives, he takes the demons to his deceased son's room and shows them the sword his son fought with before dying in battle against Aura a decade ago. After revealing more about his son, Graf turns on Lugner and threatens him. Lugner looks around and plays the father card on Graf, saying his own father was also killed in that battle, which is why he's there to push for peace. After hearing Lugner, Graf changes his mind and takes them to the meeting room. On the way, one of his subordinates, Liney, asks him what a father is, and Lugner admits he doesn't know. At the balcony, he tells her to wait until they get to Graf and convince him to lower the town's defenses so Lady Aura can feast on the humans. When he asks about the other subordinate, Drat, Liney says he went to deal with an obstacle. Just then, Drat shows up at the dungeon, takes out the prison guard, and finds himself in Frieren's cell. The idiot thought Frieren would be an easy win. Frieren warns him that she's stronger than he thinks, but of course, the fool never listens. Before Drat shows off his hidden magic wires, he asks Frieren who she thinks she is. Frieren claims she's stronger than Aura the Guillotine, and Drat laughs, thinking she's just bluffing. When it comes down to it, Drat reveals his deadly wires wrapped around Frieren's neck and lifts her into the air. Frieren, anticipating this move, focuses her mana around her neck to stop the wires from cutting through. Drat gives her props for keeping her cool, since most mages would have panicked. Then he tightens the wire to break through her mana and neck at the same time. Frieren rolls her eyes at his cocky expression, thinking he can take her down that easy. But before Drat can finish his thought, Frieren has already cut off one of his arms. In a split second, her hands are around his neck. He tries to fool her by begging for mercy, but she finishes him off before he can even get the words out. Now that she's taken down a demon, Frieren knows she needs to report this to Graf to alert him about the other two. Unfortunately, when she gets outside the dungeon, she sees the guard's headless body and sneaks out before anyone notices she's escaped. Meanwhile, Fern and Stark are grabbing a satisfying lunch at a random restaurant in town. After they finish eating, Fern gets up and tells Stark to follow her to the palace to ask Graf to release Frieren. If they can get her out in time, they might be able to stop those annoying demons before they destroy the town. Before they move, Stark takes a moment to consider how strong that demon Lugner is. He realizes how arrogant that guy is since he didn't even look at him or Fern the first time they met. Stark gets so scared his hands start shaking and he spills his drink. As he cleans up, he warns Fern to be careful of the demons since they must be hanging around Graf right now. Fern doesn't see a problem with that, so she pushes Stark to hurry up so they can get there fast. After Drat's death, Liney and Lugner notice his mana fading away. Instead of freaking out, they wonder who that super strong mage is. Lugner remembers seeing her before but can't place it. Before they can figure it out, Graf and his guys burst into the room and accuse them of sending Drat to kill their guard behind their backs. Lugner tries to deny it, but all the evidence points back to Drat, who's not there to defend himself. Graf knows Frieren is powerful and wouldn't attack a guard. With nothing left to lose, Graf orders his men to surround Lugner and Liney. Soon enough, they draw swords and ask Lugner one last time to produce Drat to clear this up. Tired of the questioning, Lugner decides to deal with it himself. Without hesitation, he cuts his own arm and channels magic to turn his blood into a long, flexible blade, which he uses to take out all the soldiers except Graf. After he finishes the soldiers, he turns to Graf and fights him for a minute before pausing to explain the true meaning of words to demons. He fires up the grieving father by trash-talking his son's memory before stabbing himself with Graf's sword and piercing Graf's torso with his magic blood blade. With Graf hurt, Lugner now has control of the castle. He stops the fight and locks up Graf until he reveals how to break the barrier protecting the town. Later that evening, Fern and Stark spot Frieren walking through the town square with her cloak over her head. They recognize her immediately and follow her to a secluded spot to chat. Frieren explains everything that went down in the cell, including the guard Drat killed, and asks for their take on the situation. Fern answers logically and begs Frieren not to ditch them in town. Frieren smiles and assures them not to worry about those two losers, since they're not as tough as they think. With that, she turns her back on them and sets out to complete her next mission. Just before she goes too far, Stark drops to his knees, begging to stay behind, but Fern gets grossed out by his embarrassing antics and drags him back into town. Quickly after, Frieren uses her magic detection skills to scan the whole country for big mana sources. She spots one about 10 kilometers from town and figures that Aura, the Guillotine, one of the 7 mages of destruction, is hiding her army in plain sight. Frieren grins at the chance to fight a strong opponent and hopes Aura is worth her time. That night, Stark and Fern sneak into the mansion under the cover of darkness to find Graf and eliminate the peace envoys. They check out a few dark rooms after getting into the inner chambers and slip through an open window. While doing this, they see Lugner on one of the upper floors with Liney and a tied-up, injured Graf. Before torturing Graf, Lugner explains how magic works and how demons are working together to create spells that go beyond human understanding. He rages about geniuses like Flam, the legendary mage, cursing her for putting up a barrier that's held strong around the town. If it weren't for her, they would have taken this town out ages ago. With Graf in his hands, Lugner wants Granat to show him how to break the barrier protecting the town. Lugner gives Granat one last chance to spill the location of the grimoire that can undo the spell, but Granat stays quiet. Annoyed, Lugner leaves to think about his next move while he and Liney continue searching the mansion for the grimoire. Not long after he leaves, Stark sneaks into the room where Granat is tied up to save him. Before he can untie him, Stark starts shaking, and Granat notices. They chat a bit, then Stark gets a grip and desperately tries to cut the thick ropes. Granat soon loses hope and tells Stark to grab his necklace, so he can show it to the guard and get everyone out. Stark stands up, pulls out his axe, and gets ready to smash the fancy-looking chair to free Granat. Just then, Lugner and Liney walk in and see Stark trembling in front of them. Granat denies knowing Stark, and Lugner gives him a chance to escape while he can. Stark gets mad at Lugner for underestimating him and attacks. Lugner is all for the challenge and quickly injures Stark's arms. After pinning him down down, Lugner calls him a fool for attacking solo. At that point, Stark calls for Fern, and she swoops in with a surprise attack that puts a hole in Lugner's chest. Stunned by how well Fern controls her mana, Lugner is confused about how he just got hit. He asks Fern what spell she used, and she tells him it's just Zoltrak. Lugner gets angry and tells her to stop messing around. He then throws more questions at her to figure out how she learned that spell, but Fern isn't interested in talking. Before round 2 kicks off, Fern and Stark manage to get Granat to safety. After they leave, Lugner tells Liney that he's got a grudge against those two, and they need to track them down soon. Then, he talks about the new spell with Liney, and remembers the exact mage who hit him with that same spell long ago, Frieren. In that moment, Lugner finally realizes who the mysterious mage is. He calls Frieren the slayer of demons and a genius he can't stand. Around the same time, Frieren catches up to Aura to stop her army. Stark and Fern take Granat to a nearby church to get him fixed up. When the doctor finishes helping him, Granat tries to get up and talk to his rescuers. He thanks them for saving him and promises to let their mage friend off the hook for helping them dodge the demon's tricks. Fern tells him that Frieren didn't kill the guard, and Granat admits he knows that. More importantly, when Granat finds out the mage's name is Frieren, he feels dumb for disrespecting her and throwing her in the dungeon. Granat shares that it was Frieren and the heroes from his grandfather's time who drove Aura and the Demon King away from their village, earning them about 60 years of peace and prosperity. Now that Aura is way stronger, anyone who goes against her could be in serious trouble. At the same time, Frieren reintroduces herself to Aura, her old frenemy, and urges her to go back to wherever she came from and leave the town alone. But Aura doesn't back down without a fight, sending some of her undead soldiers to take on Frieren. Frieren easily defends herself, but finds herself surrounded by Aura's puppets. After a quick chat with Aura, Frieren recognizes some gear on Aura's puppets and decides it's time to take her out for good. In response, Aura reveals her secret weapon, the Scales of Obedience. Back at the church, Granat explains what this special weapon is. The Scale of Obedience activates when Aura places her soul and that of her enemy on either side of the scale, and waits for it to tip based on who has more mana. The one with less mana will have to obey her forever. It's pretty risky, but Aura has lived for 500 years and has one of the biggest mana reserves ever, so she's never lost a bet. Granat warns both adventurers not to underestimate the magic power of the 7 Sages of Destruction. After hearing this, Fern asks if there's a way to counter it. Granat tells her that while the scales are fair, nobody's matched Aura's mana in 500 years since she became a Sage of Destruction. Fern then asks if there's a way to fight it, and Granat says yes. If a soldier with a strong will gets caught in the trap, they could fight off the obedience spell for a bit before being taken over for good. During that time, Aura would struggle to control them. If she succeeds, she'll eliminate them after gaining control. Around this time, Frieren gets overrun by the massive horde of zombie soldiers, so she uses up a lot of her mana to break the magic controlling them. This surprises Aura a little, and she asks Frieren why she didn't use flashy magic to blow them up like she did 80 years ago. Frieren explains it's because Himmel scolded her. Aura says she can do what she wants now that Himmel's gone, and Frieren takes that to heart. She stands up and decides to take out the demons without holding back. While Stark gets dressed, he confirms that Graf is safe, so he can head out and hunt for the demons. Fern warns him not to get too full of himself since those demons can pack a punch. Stark responds that someone has to take them down, so he's off to do what needs to be done. Inspired, Fern decides to tag along, but Stark tells her to focus on getting the townspeople to safety while he searches for Frieren, and pleads with her to help take down the demons afterward. They agree on this plan and get moving. Before they split up, Fern notices Stark's bloodied arms and makes a stink about it. In return, Stark points out the blood stain on her robe and asks her about it. Fern then realizes the mana in the blood and tosses her robe aside. Just as she's about to check Stark's robe, Lugner and Liney jump out at them. Lugner stabs Fern and slams her against the wall, while Liney conjures an axe and knocks Stark to the ground. After that first hit, Stark gets back up and recognizes the technique Liney used as one from Eisen. Meanwhile, Lugner talks for a bit before getting to the point. Fern lets him ask her a few questions to stall for time. Lugner underestimates her and moves on to ask about Stark's strength. Fern tells him Stark is Eisen's top student, but Lugner just brushes it off. Next, he asks her where Frieren is, and she tells him Frieren took off because he killed a guard. Before he can ask another question, Lugner steps back to think. Eventually, he figures Frieren must have run off to find and take down Aura. During that brief moment, Fern grabs her staff, breaks free from Lugner's hold, and gets close enough to threaten him. After going on about why he thinks he's so great, Fern warns Lugner that she's going to blast a hole in his chest. Lugner challenges her to try and claims he'll have her head rolling before she can even get to him. Before anything else happens, Fern remembers the time she asked Frieren about her spellcasting speed. That day was just another ordinary day, and they had just finished taking out a bunch of demon horses. She recalls Frieren saying her quick casting was the reason she made Fern do most of the demon slaying. Just before the big clash, there's an awkward silence between them. Then, in an instant, both Lugner and Fern launch their attacks, moving at lightning speed. From their exchange, Fern spots Lugner's weak Spothus heart. With that in mind, they kick off their battle. Meanwhile, Liney stands over Stark's unconscious body, thinking she's done with the fight. Just then, Stark gets back up and tells her not to feel too satisfied yet because he's still ready to go. Liney readies herself again and keeps attacking him. Lugner and Fern are really going at it. After taking so many hits from Fern, Lugner finally admits she's strong and curses Frieren for teaching her how to be a proper mage. He thinks if he keeps attacking her, she'll run out of mana, but what he doesn't realize is Fern has way more mana than he thinks. He keeps taking her hits for a while until he has to call Liney for backup. Meanwhile, Liney is on the offense, while Stark tries to defend against her attacks. They hit a stalemate, and Stark asks her how she can mimic other people's techniques so well. She gives him a quick rundown and keeps fighting until she pins him down again. Not giving him a second to breathe, she attacks and keeps him cornered. Stark toughens up his defense until he finally loses it and takes a hit to the shoulder from one of Liney's attacks. Before throwing in the towel, he remembers a lesson from his master, Aizen, who said losing is subjective for a warrior. As long as you get back up to fight, you've never really lost. Realizing he's still got some fight left, Stark gets back up and notices how light his master's punches were. He faces Liney again and lets her stab him in the belly with her fake axe. Meanwhile, Lugner and Fern expand their attack range, and Linian slices right through Stark's wide-open defense. Now that she's walked right into his trap, Stark unleashes his lightning strike to take her down. Lugner notices something off with Liney's mana and gets distracted for a moment. Fern takes her chance to hit him with a Zoltrak spell, blasting another hole in his chest and this time, taking his heart out. Before the main story kicks off again, we get a flashback to Frieren's early days with her master Flam, 1,000 years ago, after the legendary mage saved her from dying. In this flashback, we see a young Frieren walking through the woods with Flam, chatting about how dishonorable it is to fool demons. Flam brings up the jerk Basalt, who wiped out her elven village, and tells Frieren that demons are all scumbags who don't care about honor, honesty, or fairness. So, why should she, being human, play fair with them? If calling her disgraceful means tricking demons and taking them out before they catch on, then she's totally okay with that label. After getting mortally wounded in the heart, Lugner just sits there and accepts he's done for. Before finishing him off, Fern asks about Frieren's fight against someone called Lady Aura. Lugner shrugs it off, saying he's not worried about how it'll end because he knows Frieren's going to lose. When Fern asks why, he says it's because Lady Aura has way more mana than anyone in the demon army. He underestimates Frieren's mana output and tells Fern she's guaranteed to lose if Aura weighs their souls against her obedience scale. Fern shoots back, saying she knows her master will always come up with some trick to best Aura and her lame mana. At this point, Lugner starts to feel off about how Fern keeps hitting him hard despite her weak mana. Just then, it clicks for him, and he figures out Fern and Frieren's trick behind their low mana levels. But before he can say anything, Fern finishes him off. In the next scene, the flashback of Frieren's early life carries on, showing the moment Flam met her for the first time. Flam randomly stumbles upon a fallen elven village and discovers that demons, led by Basalt the Throne, were behind the destruction. She finds a teenage elven mage with a ton of mana, the one who actually defeated the general, but the battles left her in bad shape. Flam feels disgusted by Frieren's try to just fight openly and show all her cards. Just when she's about to leave the mage to her fate, Frieren speaks up, telling Flam she knows her own power, so she shouldn't hide. Flam's impressed by her insight and decides to take Frieren under her wing. She piggybacks the hurt little elf and takes her out of the burning village after learning her name. On their way to Flam's house, Frieren asks what happened to her village. Flam tells her it's gone, so she shouldn't worry about anyone being left behind. Frieren asks to be put down so she can go on her way, but Flam refuses. Instead, she tells Frieren she's her new student now and needs to get used to it. Not long after, Flam senses 3 demon mages chasing them and stops to face them. When the mages show up, they demand Flam hand over the girl and scram. Flam sets Frieren down and teaches her her first lesson. She knows how foolish and overconfident demons can get when their magic strength is questioned. Having lived among them as a powerful mage, Flam learned this trick that catches them off guard. Just when they think everything's cool, she unleashes a quick attack that wipes them all out super fast. After that, she turns to Frieren and explains how she did it. Frieren figures out the trick and tells Flam she knows Flam hides her massive mana by controlling the output, making others think she's just a weakling. Flam acknowledges her answer and takes her back to her house in the woods. A few days later, Flam kicks off Frieren's training after taking care of her injuries. On their way to the fields, she talks about her life with the young elf, who's pretty excited about it. Once they reach the fields, Flam has Frieren reduce her mana output to just 1/10 of what it was. After she gets that down, she'll boost her mana reserves a ton. As Frieren starts training, she asks her master how long they'll be doing this. Flam smiles and tells her they'll spend their whole lives tricking demons into underestimating them so they can catch them off guard. Right now, Frieren stands before Aura and her army of undead, with only 1/10 of her mana leaking out. Aura Aura starts chatting about Lugner and the other two losers biting the dust. When it's time to get serious, she challenges Frieren to bet her soul on a scale of obedience to see whose mana is stronger. Frieren takes a moment to size up the huge mana Aura is giving off, but stops herself from being overwhelmed when Aura begins the ritual. Before anything gets going, the flashback continues, showing Frieren in another town gathering supplies with her master. At one point, she asks Flam why demons can't hide their mana like they do. Flam explains it's because demons are all about themselves and care more about personal success than rules and order. To help Frieren understand better, Flam talks about how humans have this love-hate relationship with wealth and power, saying demons see mana the same way. Sometimes they'll hold back their mana for stealth, but none are dumb enough to do it all the time, since that would mean throwing away their status, which isn't good for them. After explaining all this to Frieren, Flam reminds her how lucky she is to be an elf and not a demon. Even after 3 years of constantly holding back her mana, she's still doing it without stress. Frieren says it's because she has an awesome master. Fast forward 50 years in the flashback, and Flam is super old and wrinkly. One evening, she sees her apprentice practicing magic as usual and asks if she still loves it like she did back in the day. Frieren confirms she does, and Flam warns her never to show herself in history so she can stay under the radar until she finally takes down the Demon King. With that, she asks Frieren to plant flowers around her grave when she's gone, and Frieren picks up a flower spell right then and there. A few years later, Flam passes away, and Frieren honors her final wish. After burying her master, Frieren moves on and lives like a regular background character, training when she gets the chance and learning everything she can. Hundreds of years later, Himmel, Eisen, and the clueless Hyder finally meet her for the first time. Their meeting is awkward because Frieren tries to shoo them away, but after a lot of persuading from the hero, she finally agrees to join them on their mission to defeat the Demon King. The rest is history. Right now, Aura takes her soul and weighs the mana against Frieren's, smiling wide, thinking she's got Frieren beat. Frieren notices the smug look on Aura's face and asks why she's grinning so much. Aura ignores her and starts trash-talking Frieren's super low mana reserves. When the souls hit the scale and Aura's soul outweighs Frieren's, she gets overly cocky and moves in dangerously close with a sword, ready to take off Frieren's head. Just then, the scale starts tipping in Frieren's favor, and once she sees this, she tells Aura she's seriously misread the situation. After nearly 1,000 years of training, suppressing her mana has become second nature, so there's no way a 500-year-old demon could see through her trick. Before long, Frieren unleashes her massive mana reserves, making Aura realize just how foolish she was thinking she could outdo her. Once the scales tip in Frieren's favor, she turns her back to head home right after telling Aura to kill herself. Unable to defy Frieren's command, Aura does the unimaginable and takes her own life, wondering where it all went wrong. By morning, Fern shows up at Aura's last battleground and sees her master paying respects to the soldiers who have been freed from Aura's deadly zombie grip. Noticing the gruesome scene, Fern walks up to her master and asks if she finally took down Aura. Frieren says yes. Soon, Graf and Stark arrive, and Frieren tries to make a run for it. Luckily, Graf had already pardoned her, so she's free to go. Then, Graf checks out the armors of the fallen zombie soldiers and thanks Frieren for treating them with respect. A little while later, while Graf is inspecting the armors, Frieren and her crew start reminiscing about the good old days with Himmel, who would scold her for using flashy spells. After chatting about her past, she gives a shout out to Fern and Stark for taking down Lugner and his partner, Liney, without her help. Stark and Fern try to downplay their achievements, but just then, Granat and his guys find his long-dead son's armor, with the Granat family crest necklace still hanging on it. Granat pays his last respects to his son and heads back to town. Days later, Granat finally meets with Frieren and her group to talk about their reward. While Granat has been working hard to do amazing things for them, he can't figure out why Frieren only wants the grimoire for their defensive barriers and stuff. Frieren explains that she has a long-time hobby of collecting spells and grimoires from around the world. Then, Granat tells her to chill with the formalities since he knows she sees him as a kid compared to how long she's been alive. Frieren, however, sticks with the formal talk because of her past experience when Hyder and Himmel almost got executed just for being casual with the Graf. At this point, Stark is already getting jittery, and it gets worse when the lumberjack shows up with an axe. Thinking the guy is the executioner, Stark collapses right on his knees and gets carried out of Granat's room after the meeting. Next up, Frieren and Fern catch everyone's attention as they walk through the town square with a passed-out Stark floating in midair. Over the next 6 months or so, Frieren and her crew hang out in town and meet new people every day. At one point, they witness the final burial of the fallen soldiers from Aura's army, including Graf Granat's son. Finally, after their 6-month stay is over, Frieren and her group load up on supplies and get ready to continue their journey to heaven. On that day, Graf walks them to the gates, warning them to watch out for the harsh northern plateau since travel is restricted and only first-class mages can pass through some areas. Frieren gets confused about this first-class mage thing and asks Fern for more info. Fern pulls out her certification showing she's a third-class mage and shows it to her master. Frieren rolls her eyes at it and asks Graf if there's a city up north where they can get her a certification. Graf tells her she can get it in Oberst, the biggest city past theirs further north. After giving them directions to the large city, Graf thanks Frieren and her companions one last time before letting them continue their journey. Less than a day later, it starts snowing, and Frieren starts feeling some serious PTSD. When Fern asks her about the northern winters, Frieren tells her there's nothing good about them at all. She was right, since the blizzards just kept getting stronger day by day. Before they even got to the Schwer Mountains, they were already lost and freezing cold. Stark is the first to pass out from hypothermia, and Fern tries to wake him up, but nothing works since he's out cold. Unable to use magic to carry him, Fern decides to drag the lazy guy to the nearest shelter up the road. As expected, Stark's a total jerk the whole time, giving Fern the creeps since she smells way better than he has in years. After an hour of trudging through the snow, they finally reach the shed Frieren mentioned. Fern senses someone inside and suggests they leave, but Frieren ignores the crying kid and opens the door anyway, only to find a ripped elf dude doing squats to stay warm. Fern, having never seen a guy with a six-pack, initially thinks he's a creep, so she yanks Frieren out and says they should find another place. Just then, the guy opens the door and gives her a dirty look for calling him a pervert. When he sees Frieren is an elf, he invites them inside and has them make a fire in his fireplace. Once everyone is warmed up and past the small talk, the muscular elf introduces himself as Kraft the monk. After learning Frieren and Fern's names, they chat about where they're headed. When Kraft finds out they're going to heaven, he praises them for being righteous. Frieren brushes it off, but then Stark's body feels colder. While they're worried about the poor guy, it turns out he's just deep in thought about his favorite dessert. When he finally wakes up, he's wrapped up in Kraft's arms and freaks out, waking everyone else. It turns out Kraft just covered him to share some warmth. Once he's awake, Stark checks out the monk's nice body and asks him about his workout routine. After learning Kraft's name, Stark asks to train with him. Before that happens, Kraft leads the girls outside to grab supplies from his food cart buried in the snow. On the way back, he asks Frieren if she knows anything about him, but when she says no, he tells her the same. Fern tries to tell him she's the one who defeated the Demon King with a team of heroes, but Kraft didn't even know about demons. When they get back to the shed, they settle in there for the next 6 months until winter is over. During those months, Stark trains with Kraft as much as he can to get pumped and ready for their next adventures. When it was time for them to part ways, Kraft gave Frieren a cool carved necklace and started chatting about this goddess that everyone seems to vibe with. Frieren straight up told him she's not into that whole worship thing, but Kraft wished that for everyone's sake, the goddess was real. If she wasn't, then his life would feel pointless. Then he asked Frieren to break down her life story for him so he could give her some props since she doesn't believe in any god. This made Frieren think back to a memory she had with Hyder, the priest, from 80 years ago when the tipsy priest brought up the same topic. Back then, Hyder was the only one in her friend group who knew she was holding back her mana the whole time. He thought she was pretty interesting and wanted to learn more about her. Frieren shrugged it off, saying she wasn't anything special since she's been living life like a zombie. Hyder laughed and told her to share her life story since he might have a mage kid soon. Remembering that moment, Frieren figured she didn't need to retell her life story since she'd already done it before. Kraft asked about the weird guy who had asked her the same question, and she told the monk that the jerk is in heaven now. Eventually, they all got their stuff sorted out, and Kraft went on his way. Fern and Stark did their best to say goodbye since they knew they'd never see the nice monk again in their sad little lives. Weeks later, Frieren and her friends are trudging through heavy snow to reach the next town a few miles ahead. Midway through, Frieren dozes off and almost hits her head on the ground, but Fern catches her just in time. Stark and Fern start sweating about how to deal with Frieren now that she's out cold. Stark offers to carry her, but Fern looks at his face and decides he's up to no good, so she just throws the poor elf on her back and keeps walking. While snoozing, Frieren drifts into a dream about a cheap jerk of a king who shortchanged them for slaying a giant monster back when she was part of a hero squad. As they head toward their next stop, Himmel shows off his hero sword, and Frieren asks if it's the real deal. When Hyder says no, Himmel explains he got it from a blacksmith he saved when he was younger. Frieren then asks if that's why he became a hero, and Himmel says not really. He actually became a hero because of a bet he made against Hyder back in their orphanage days. Now that he's a real hero, the guy who challenged him is just a drunk priest, which is a hilarious twist. Everyone bursts out laughing and has a blast. Frieren just stands there, gazing at her friends as they stroll into the sunset, slowly snapping back to reality. Frieren wakes up, still thinking about her dream, but then the nasty weather snaps her back. She urges Fern and Stark to keep pushing until they make it to the village and clings to Fern's back because she smells good. Stark then asks Fern if he can carry their master, but Fern still doesn't trust him. Eventually, they get moving again and stop when they reach the edge of the next town up north. There, Frieren hops off Fern's back and meets the young village chief, who gives her a warm welcome to the village of the sword. Frieren Frieren praises the chief for being so young and impressive, then asks about the destruction on the village's outskirts. The chief tells her it's the work of the Lord of the Mountain. At that moment, Stark starts talking. Fern asks if he's heard of this mountain before, and Stark says yeah. According to legend, this village is supposed to house the hero's sword, which was placed in a sanctuary nearby. It's said that whoever can pull the sword out of the stone is a true hero. Over the years, tons of mages and heroes have tried to pull it out, but none succeeded until Himmel managed to pull it out 80 years ago. A little later, the village chief comes to their cabin and makes them feel at home. While they warm themselves by the fire, the chief gives Frieren a hard time for showing up late and not doing her job. Fern gets confused and asks what job she's talking about. Frieren explains she's talking about monster hunting, and she promises to start that tomorrow. The next day, Stark, Fern, and Frieren hit the mountains to take out some monster wolves before checking out a sketchy cave. Stark finds a whole pack of wolves and takes them all down, just waiting for the big trouble to hit. Frieren tries to warn the guy to scram, but it's too late, you know. The Lord of the Mountains, who's basically a huge demon wolf, shows up. Frieren steps up to face this beast and gets Stark to chop off one of its arms while Fern throws some protective magic around her. Once she gets her team to do the tough stuff, she blasts the demon wolf into oblivion with Zoltrak. Afterward, Stark is totally confused because he doesn't get why the hero sword is still stuck in stone when the stories say Himmel took it with him. At first, Frieren tells some nonsense about demons wanting to destroy the sword, but when Stark tells her to get real, she admits it's because Himmel couldn't actually pull it out. Turns out, Himmel wasn't bummed about failing. Instead, he used that failure to motivate himself to show everyone that anyone can be a hero if they put in the effort. Fast forward 80 years, Himmel earns his rep and becomes a better hero than any jerk out there. Fern asks why they spun this cover-up tale, and that's when Frieren spills why she likes staying behind the scenes. She hates how future generations romanticize heroes, making people feel worse about themselves every time they stumble. After a bit more chit-chat, Frieren and the other two ladies take off, leaving Stark sitting in the snow, lost in thought about his life. Now done with their work in the village, Frieren and her buddies head to the Apetite region up north. They roll into town around New Year's and crash at the best inn. Soon, Frieren spends her time reading grimoires while Fern gets ready to shop. She asks her master to tag along, but Frieren opts to stay inside. Before Fern takes off, Frieren reminds her it's Stark's birthday, so she should grab him something nice. When Fern asks what Frieren's getting for Stark, Frieren pulls out a potion that melts clothes and says men really dig that stuff. Fern snatches the potion from her and dumps it on her head, melting her clothes and leaving her naked in the room before heading out. Frieren covers herself up and starts brainstorming a good gift for Stark. Just then, she trips over something and decides to use it. Fern is on the lookout for Stark and finally spots him counting cloud shapes that look like boobs on the edge of town. She tries to talk to him, but after hearing his silly comments, she steps back and changes her mind. Eventually, she gathers her courage to approach him and interrupts his boob jokes. Stark goes quiet and follows her for a stroll around town. During the walk, he asks if he's been a bad guy. Fern only speaks up when she wants to know if he wants anything. Stark is confused and asks her to explain what she means. That's when Fern reminds him it's his birthday and tells him she'd like to give him a birthday gift. Stark is even more puzzled and asks if that's what they do on birthdays since he's never gotten a present from his deceased family or master. Fern becomes worried at first, thinking he's joking, but then realizes he's serious. Stark starts sharing his unsettling backstory from when he was younger. He grew up in a village of warriors, always living in his brother Stoltz's shadow. Stoltz was a kind, powerful warrior, while their dad was a jerk who didn't care about Stark, who was weaker back then. Still, Stoltz never held it against him, and often trained with the cute, confused redhead. Everything was going fine until demons attacked and destroyed their village. Stark was the only one who got away unharmed because his brother sacrificed himself to save him. After hearing the story, Fern feels both sorry and proud of the goofy brother for being brave up to that point. To show her appreciation, she takes him to a gift shop and gets him something inexpensive he can hold on to forever. Later that night, they come home to find Frieren cooking big hamburger steaks for the three of them. Stark remembers his master doing the same thing, and Frieren tells him it was a tradition in his village to make hamburger steaks for anyone's birthday. After another quick memory flash, Stark finally understands how much love he's received from his brother and master in the past. As the last memory of his brother plays in his mind, he gets really emotional when he takes his first bite of the hamburger steak. Eventually, the girls join him at the table, and they all have a great time that night. A few weeks later, Frieren and her crew roll into the next town and bump into a weird guy in the Alt Woods. This dude is all about being an adventurer like Frieren and her squad, but doesn't have the guts to actually get out there and do anything. Before anything happens, he starts telling Frieren his backstory from when he was a kid, about how he almost hit the road with his buddy to explore the world and become an adventurer. After listening to his ramble, Frieren asks him why he's blabbing about this nonsense. nonsense. He says it's because he's stuck in a never-ending swamp and is just trying to gather firewood. The guy begs Frieren to help him out of the mud that's threatening to swallow him, but Frieren isn't keen to get her hands dirty. Luckily, before he's totally out of luck, Fern swoops in and saves him from drowning. Next, they help the muddy dude get back to the edge of his village, and he invites them to chill at their harvest festival as a thank you for rescuing him. But Frieren says they need to hit a bigger town for supplies, so they'll see him later. The guy wishes them well, but before they can make much progress, Stark gets bitten by a venomous snake. He quickly realizes he's bleeding from the nose and asks the girls to help him out. Frieren and Fern sit him down and try a bunch of healing spells before deciding to take him to the church in the nearby village for more help. They argue about it for a bit before finally hauling the bloodied Stark over there. When they reach the church, the priest checks him out and tells them it's too late for him. As Stark panics, the guy says to wait for his brother to give his healing magic a shot on him. Just then, the swamp dude from before shows up, jabbering about random stuff. After yapping for a few seconds, he recognizes Stark and heals him up like it was no big deal. Then he bounces out to the plaza. After he leaves, Frieren chats with the priest about how genius his brother is, noting how easily he healed Stark's serious issue. The priest tells her about his brother Hyder's visit to their area, and admits Hyder is only proud of his priest badge. But when it comes to skills and talent, his brother Sign and the swamp guy easily outshine him. Ever since they lost their parents as kids, the priest has worried about his younger brother. Over time, he realized Sane's dream is to be an adventurer, not a boring village priest like him. Now that they're older, the priest feels bad for his brother since he's settled into the dull routine of being a priest. His first request to Frieren and her crew is to help him get his brother out of the village so he can live life to the fullest again. Frieren and her crew got home that night bickering about adding another member to their squad. Fern and Stark were all for bringing a priest along, but Frieren didn't want any extra baggage. She felt 3 was always a crowd. Stark quickly brushed her off and went down to the pub to find Sign. When he got there, he found Sign drinking, smoking, and throwing dice with a group of troublemakers. Stark was initially disgusted, but after a few questions, Sign invited him to join their gambling table. About an hour later, Fern heard Stark yelling his head off. She woke Frieren up and raced to see what was going on. They found Stark and Sign nearly naked, just in their boxers. Frieren figured out that Sign couldn't handle losing, so she talked some sense into him, shared a few of her own memories, and asked him to join their adventuring team so he could at least do what he wanted with the rest of his sad life. Even after that, Sign flat out refused to join. By then, Frieren was fed up with his arrogance. She vowed to get him on their team whether he liked it or not. Just then, Fern showed up with all of Stark and Sign's stuff, which she got back from the winner for free. She tossed them their grimy clothes and acted like a spoilt kid dealing with little boys. Once they moved past the whole gambling fiasco, Fern and the crew talked about what they found out. Fern was pretty chill about Sign's drinking, but Frieren was more focused than ever on getting him to join them. Over the next couple of days, Frieren kept trying to convince Sign to hop on board, but after days of helping, promising, and chatting, Sign still said no. After a few more failed attempts, they went to talk to his brother to find out what Sign liked. His brother said Sign loved gambling, alcohol, and tobacco. Plus, he mentioned that Sign had a thing for older women. Too bad they didn't have an older woman to lure him in. Right then, Sign walked out from the back to ask his brother something, but when he saw Frieren and the others again, he froze and bolted. Stark chased him outside and asked if he'd be interested in traveling with an older woman. Sign replied that he was always up for anything, which was partly why he wanted to be an adventurer. When he asked Stark to show him where this older woman was, Frieren called him out and let him know she was the one Stark was talking about. By then, Sign was really disappointed. Frieren tried to win him over by blowing him a kiss, but a kiss from a girl as small as her would just make Sign feel like a predator. The atmosphere went silent after that awkward move, and Frieren wondered what went wrong. Eventually, Sign told them to quit the nonsense and give up on trying to get him to join them. He then told his brother there was a good chance his friend was already dead. Frieren went on another rant trying to convince him. When she asked why he couldn't just come with them, Sign spilled about a meeting he saw his brother have with Hyder when Hyder was alive. Hyder tried to recruit Sign's brother to go to the capital, but he chose to stay and look after Sign. Although Hyder admired his loyalty, he was still disappointed he couldn't get him to the capital. After hearing everything Sign said, his older brother walked up and slapped him hard. He said he'd never regretted his decision to stay back and would rather die than see Sign living a dumb life. Late that night, Sign apologized to Frieren for his brother, and they talked things out, laying down his conditions before leaving town. As they stepped out of town, Sane asked where they were headed, and Frieren replied, "Heaven." He mumbled a few more words and soon realized just how rude Fern was. After traveling for a few more days, they finally made it to the Rod region up north. As they wandered around the town, Frieren remembered the last time she was there with Himmel and the gang, like 80 years ago. She realized the place still looked pretty much the same, with its nice shops and cool buildings. When they got to the inn, Stark got into a huge fight with Fern and stormed out of the room. Sign saw the whole thing go down but didn't stop him. He just stayed inside and asked Frieren to explain. It turned out it was Fern's birthday, and Stark didn't get her a gift, which made her act like a spoiled spoiled brat. This time, Frieren didn't take her side, and Sign tried to make her understand that guys don't really care about birthdays and anniversaries the way girls do. This only made her even more mad, so she kicked him until he got tired of her attitude. After a while, he told her to go after Stark and apologize. Frieren agreed, so Fern started searching everywhere for him. Eventually, she found him sitting by the fountain in the plaza, sulking and thinking about life. Not knowing how to approach him, Fern left and spotted Sign checking out some gifts to give her. After chatting about the gifts, Sign asked if she'd found Stark yet. Fern said yes, but she didn't know how to talk to him. Sign figured out why she felt that way. She wasn't used to talking to boys her age. While picking a gift, Sign told her not to blame Stark since he probably didn't even remember his own birthday. Even though she knew he was right, Fern shot back that she had given Stark a gift for his birthday, so he should have done the same for her. Sign asked if she picked it out for him or went with him to get it. When she replied it was the latter, Sign kept spitting out facts until he eventually changed her mind and pushed her to go talk to the slowpoke. After Fern gave Stark her birthday present, she apologized for kicking him, and they made up. About an hour later, Fern found Stark in the plaza, checking out a statue of Himmel the hero. She called him over, and he apologized for not getting her a gift earlier. Honestly, Lil Bro didn't know what she liked, and was too scared to ask her to go pick out a gift together, thinking she'd just get annoyed again. Fern told him not to think like that, and then apologized for being harsh, and they kissed and made up. Once they got past their little spat, Stark took his new girl to the gift shop to pick out a nice gift for her. Meanwhile, Sign spotted Frieren watching over Stark and Fern from a roof, and called her out for being sneaky. He then talked about the privilege of being young, and getting into arguments while forming new bonds, before asking Frieren how she dealt with her teenage drama. When she asked for more context, Sign realized he was the only adult among the four of them. Frieren soon matched his vibe, and chatted about Hyder's messed up behavior, and how he annoyed her. Sign was a bit shocked hearing all that about Hyder, since the old dude he knew was usually chill and calm. Before saying anything else, Frieren recalled a memory with Hyder when he was old and about to kick the bucket. That night, she asked him how he became so mature and responsible compared to the awful person he was ages ago. Hyder went off on some grand philosophy about life and even mentioned Fern. Frieren asked a few more questions, then stood up and patted Hyder's head as a way to praise him. Just then, she did the same to Sign and called him a proper adult. Sign thanked Frieren for the support but wished an older woman would do that for him. A few days later, the four of them catch a ride in the Band-Aid woods to get to the next town. After chatting a bit with the driver, Frieren notices the cute new bracelet on Fern's wrist and asks her about it. Fern gets a little shy and admits it was a gift from Stark. Frieren recognizes the design and digs through her stuff until she finds the ring Himmel gave her ages ago. Just when she's about to say something, an avian monster swoops down and lifts their carriage into the air. Frieren feels sorry for letting her guard down and shifts the convo to ways they can avoid becoming monster snacks. She starts sharing her flying story until Stark interrupts, telling her to get to the point. Eventually, Frieren decides she'll fly with the driver, while Fern does the same with Sign, to ensure a safer landing. As for Stark, she just tells him to jump down. He's not into that, obviously, and Frieren wonders why not. Fern suggests they use magic to levitate the whole carriage, and Frieren thinks that's a solid idea. Just then, the avian monster dives down to crash the carriage into the ground and chow down on the leftovers. Before it can do that, Frieren jumps out and takes the demon down with a Zoltrak spell. After destroying it, their carriage tumbles into the deep forest. Luckily, Frieren manages to slow them down before they crash, so even though they lose some of their stuff, they're still alive. By night, Sign takes care of the horse and joins the others in feeling down, especially since they're stranded. Thankfully, they don't lose hope yet and spend the next few days gathering wood from the forest to fix the carriage while lazy Frieren kicks back and organizes her stuff. One time, Sign learns about the bracelet Stark gave Fern for her birthday and praises the poor guy for spending 3 miserable hours hunting for the perfect gift. In the end, Stark is really happy he found something she loves. Later, Sign explains the real meaning behind the bracelet. Design the inverted lotus hand tells Stark that people only give that kind of gift to their partners. Stark gets nervous and rushes to apologize to Fern, who can hear everything, for moving too fast. Fern stays stern and scolds Stark when he offers to return the gift and buy her a new bracelet. So, the trio heads back to their crash site to keep fixing the carriage however they can. Hours turn into days with everyone pitching in to get things going. A few nights later, they finally wrap up the repairs. Fern finds Frieren digging around in the woods and discovers she's been looking for the ring Himmel gave her 80 years ago. She joins her master in the search, but Frieren tells her not to worry since she's already used to losing things by now. Fern tries to explain the meaning behind the ring and bracelet patterns, but Frieren brushes it off. She's ready to let the ring go since losing things doesn't bother her anymore. Fern brings her master back to the campsite to ask for help. Their driver, overhearing this, gives Frieren a scroll with a spell from his village that can help her track down her ring. Frieren thanks him, takes the scroll, and flies up into the air. After recalling the moment Himmel bought the ring for her, Frieren gives the spell a shot. Seconds later, the ring's location pings back to her, and it seems to be nearby. Before going for it, Frieren remembers the moment she got the ring and goes to retrieve it. The next day, Frieren holds the ring close and smiles because now she understands why Himmel gave it to her. After traveling for a few more weeks, Frieren and her friends finally get to the Lob Hills up north. At first, they ride along towards the next town with their carriage driver. After a bit of quiet, Sign pipes up and asks Fern and Stark how long they've been traveling with Frieren. Once they answer, they keep going until Sign starts chatting again. This time, he's complaining that the group is missing something important. Fern thinks they need a thief to help Frieren avoid traps and treasure chests, but Sign straight up says they need an older woman with a hotter bod. Stark tells him Frieren's old enough already, and then Sign challenges him to point out one sexy part of her body. To dodge trouble, Stark changes the subject and points to the village ahead. Unfortunately, when they reach the village, they find everyone there passed out. Sign rushes over to check their vitals and is relieved to find they're still alive. Frieren suggests they leave the village just like they found it, which gets Fern mad. Eventually, they investigate further and discover the villagers are under a curse. Frieren explains how serious curses can be to Stark, making him really freaked out since he thinks it's probably too late to save everyone. Luckily, they've got a priest like Sign with them, so he starts figuring out how to break the curse while Frieren keeps talking. When she finally asks for proof, Sign needs more time to finish up. Meanwhile, Frieren and the others explore the houses in the village, and she talks about the priesthood and the big perks of being a priest, like their strong resistance to curses. She even says that, despite being an elven mage, she still can't figure out or defend against curses, but she can tell the village is still cursed. Stark and Fern start freaking out, worried they might end up like the villagers. Just then, Sign figures out that the curse comes from a monster in the woods and tells them to hustle before they all fall asleep. Right when they're about to move, Stark collapses and succumbs to the curse. Frieren asks the priest to wake him up, but he says it's not doable. So, they head out on their long trek, carrying Stark until they find a camp to rest at by nightfall. Not long after, Fern falls asleep too. When Sign and Frieren notice, they set up a barrier around Fern and Stark before heading into the darkness to find the monster. As they get closer, Frieren warns Sign not to take on the monster solo, but just as he's about to respond, she falls asleep too. After several failed attempts to wake her, Sign gives up and carefully places her nearby. Moments later, the monster, which Sign identifies as a chaos flower, appears like a hungry plant and attacks him. Sign does his best to dodge the flower's strikes. When he spots a chance at its core, he blasts it with a magic attack, but the chaos flower deflects it. With this twist, Sign starts thinking of all his options to take this thing down. He considers waking Frieren, but realizes he won't have enough time to fill her in before she zonks out again. Just when he's about to abandon that idea, he remembers something Hyder taught him about Frieren way back. If Frieren is the fighter Hyder described, he might just have a shot. After avoiding the chaos flower's last attack, Sign wakes her up and tries to explain what's going on. Out of nowhere, Frieren goes into action with a flexible Zoltrak attack pattern and destroys the core and the monster in one go. The next morning, Fern, Stark, Frieren, and Sign head back to the village to find everyone awake and thankful for kicking that useless monster to the curb, the one that messed with their livelihoods. After getting a shout out from the village elder, who's kind of a hotshot, Frieren and the crew hit the road to the next town. On the way, Frieren gives Sign a pat on the head and thanks him for his help earlier. Before long, they arrive at Vorig, the fortress city, and a stopover to Oberst. That's when Frieren learns they're almost out of cash. Just before they reach the city gates, a nobleman spots them and comes over in his carriage. He hops down with his butler, checks out Stark, and invites him to his mansion for a job. In the blink of an eye, Stark is already inside the rich guy's mansion, talking to him. The nobleman kicks things off by asking Stark his name, but Frieren jumps in and tells him to back off from her frontline fighter. The nobleman takes offense and asks Stark if he needs his mommy to keep answering for him. At that, Frieren stands up and suggests they leave, but then she remembers they're broke, so she calms down and hears out the nobleman's offer. Once they get to know each other, the guy takes Stark for a tour around his mansion. He starts asking Stark about his village in the Klee region of the Central Lands. Stark stays quiet, and they walk until they reach a big mural of the nobleman's son on the wall. Fern and Frieren notice how much Stark looks like the guy's son, Wirt, and they wonder why it matters for the job. The nobleman, who turns out to be Lord Orden, explains he needs Stark to pretend to be his son, who died in battle about a month ago. Since no one knows Wirt is dead yet, he wants Stark to act as Wirt for a few months, so the morale in the fortress city stays up while they rebuild their forces. Near the end of the 3-month gig, Stark will have to attend a fancy party and pose as Wirt to trick important people. Once the party wraps up, Stark can leave. Hearing all of this, Frieren asks about the pay, and Lord Orden mentions it's a pretty sweet deal. She then asks him to throw in a grimoire too, and Orden agrees. Next, Stark asks what the plan is for the scar on his head, and Orden tells him to wear it with pride, saying everyone will think he got it from the recent battle. Stark grumbles about how tough life is going to be, but Fern tells him to man up and help the team make some cash. With that sorted, Orden has Gabble teach Stark some proper etiquette over the next few months, while Frieren and the others live it up like royalty. One day, Stark runs into Fern and tries out the new pose he learned. Fern's heart skips a beat, but she acts like it doesn't faze her. Stark eventually goes up to the guy who calls himself his dad in the hallway and asks why he's being so disrespectful. Orden scoffs and tells Stark he's just following his son's last wish. After hanging out in the hallway for a bit, the man takes Stark to the yard where they see his second son, Mutt, training. Stark senses some sibling rivalry brewing but keeps it to himself and continues training. Just before starting, he asks the man what he thinks of Mutt. Orden says the kid might not be as talented as his older brother, but he works hard, and that counts for something. Stark tells him to make sure Mutt knows that often, and Orden says he already does that so much that it's getting to the young boy's head. Stark laughs and gets back to training. In the next scene, Orden calls Fern and tells her to get ready for her etiquette training so she can go to the soiree with Stark. She can't say no, so Fern starts her training, which goes on for about a month until the soiree finally happens. At the event, Fern talks about how stressed she has been, and Stark tells her not to underestimate him again. After they both apologize, Stark takes Fern's hands and leads her to the dance floor to show off some dance moves. They dance gracefully and turn a lot of heads. Meanwhile, Frieren keeps munching on cake and enjoying her night. Once the soiree wraps up, Stark meets Orden one last time before getting paid. Orden thanks him for a job well done and suggests adopting Stark as a replacement for his son, but Stark makes it clear that's not going to happen. Then he comments on Stark's hometown and reflects on the day he found Stark in the woods, telling him about how he treated his son the last time they met. Stark also shares moments when he was disrespectful to his master, and they bond over their lost family members. A few days later, Frieren is having a tough time picking a new grimoire to take with her. While she struggles, Stark and Sign finally chat about their time together, and everyone is happy for the nobleman and his new heir. Before the main story picks up again, we get a flashback to the younger days of Sign the priest. One day, his adventurous friend, who was a lot younger too, found him fishing and pulled him back to the village so they could get a picture taken by the mage who often visited. Back then, Sign just went along with his buddy without a care and got that picture snapped. Fast forward over 10 years to the present, and we find Sign sitting by the campfire, staring at that same picture he took with his friend long ago this time. It's in a pendant. As he reminisces about the good old days, Sign stares off into space, worrying about where his buddy might be right now. The next day, they hit the road and walk until they reach the Klar region in the north. Along the way, Frieren talks about one of her longtime friends with the group. She mentions Old Man Vol and says she wants to catch up with him before he passes away. Stark thinks that's kind of a rude comment, but Fern is happy that Frieren still has people she can reconnect with. It turns out dwarves live for about 300 to 400 years, so there's a good chance the old man is still kicking. Frieren walks around proud and happy, hoping to finally meet the old man who's still waiting for her visit. After traveling a bit more, they arrive at Old Man Vol's village. There, Frieren and the others spot the man sitting at the village entrance. Frieren tries to jog his memory so he can remember her, but sadly, he's so old that he's kinda clueless. Stark brushes off the old man and calls him senile. To teach him a lesson, the old man whacks Stark on the shin, leaving him on the floor crying in pain. He then mutters some stuff about how warriors are careless as he officially welcomes Frieren to the village. After some small talk, Frieren takes the other two into the village, leaving Stark to train with the old man while they're there. Shortly after, Frieren asks for some work, since she plans on sticking around for about 10 years. Fern warns her not to waste any time, as they only have a week to spare. Frieren agrees to Fern's terms and continues chatting with the old man while Sign and Fern pitch in on the farm. After a hard day's work, the farmer thanks them for their help and shares some info about Old Man Vol. According to what he knows, Old Man Vol has always been the village's protector, and even he can't explain why he's so protective. Now that he has a friend to talk to, the farmer is pleased for the old man. The next few days go by with Stark struggling through training while Frieren enjoys hanging out with her old friend. One night, while walking through a field of glowing plants, Frieren checks in on Stark's progress, and the old man says he's doing alright. Moving on, she thanks him for helping her get to know Himmel and the others. In another flashback, we see Himmel and the other three from back then thanking the old man for helping them with a task. As the conversation rolls on, he talks about his late human wife and how much she loved the village he's grown used to. His last promise to her is probably what keeps him from leaving the village. The man tries to downplay himself, saying he's too old to even remember his wife's face, but Himmel and the others compliment him for keeping a promise to someone he loved. At that moment, Old Man Vol calls Himmel a fantastic hero and gives him his blessing, promising to carry his memory into the future. Himmel chuckles and assures the old man they have Frieren, who will probably live a few thousand more years, to take care of that for them. Old Man Vol smiles and praises Himmel for having great friends. After recalling a nice memory, Old Man Vol asks Frieren if she remembers Himmel's face. Frieren gets a bit annoyed and tells him she remembers Himmel, Hyder, and Eisen because they're the ones who made her want to connect with people. The old guy praises her again, saying that even though he can't remember his wife's face anymore, he still feels like he needs to protect the village. Frieren chuckles and calls him a jokester. As time passes, Old Man Vol asks Frieren where she's headed, and Frieren replies that they're all on their way to Oriol, the land where souls chill near Ende, where the demon castle is. Not knowing the demon king has already been defeated, the old man gives Frieren his blessing. She tries to tell him the truth but decides against it and promises to carry his memory into the future. future. Before they part ways, the old man thanks her for visiting him in his last moments. The next day, Frieren and the others pack up and leave the village. As they're walking out, the old man calls her back and tells her he dreamt about his wife the night before. Frieren smiles at him and keeps going. After a few more days of travel, they reach a settlement on Roar Road, still in the 29th year since Himmel's death. They stop to wait for Sign to finish asking the locals some questions. Once he's done, they head further north. Stark asks Sign what he was asking the locals earlier, and Sign asks Stark if he remembers why he came on this trip with them. When Stark says he doesn't, Sign shows them the photo in his pendant and reminds them why he's with them. He was asking if anyone had seen someone who looked like his friend lately. Now that he knows the answer is no, he pushes his buddies to keep moving north until they run into the guy. Stark asks what the friend's name is, and Sign says it's Guerrilla Warrior, a name that's hard to forget. Just to add to it, Sign mentions his own nickname, Goatee Priest, which makes the others think he's a bit odd. They continue on and reach the canyon that links the old village to Oberst. If they keep walking for the next week, they'll hit a big city in no time. Before that though, Sign wants to take a detour to check out a village near that canyon to ask about his friend. Since everyone else was looking to rest anyway, they agree to his plan. A bit later, they arrive at the village where Sign asks the first person he sees about Guerrilla Warrior. To his surprise, the guy knows the funny dude and tells him to check with the stubborn old woman living on the plateau nearby. Sign and his crew follow the guy's lead until they find the old woman. They ask her about Guerrilla Warrior's whereabouts, and she makes them do a bunch of tasks for her before she spills the info. For the first task, she gives Frieren and the others a letter to deliver to Nagel, a blacksmith in the next town. With no other choice, the four of them grab the letter and head to the next town. On the way, Frieren shares some stories about how Himmel handled things back in his day. Before long, they reach the town and deliver the letter. When they get back to the village, they keep doing some strange tasks for the old lady, which sometimes even involve fighting monsters. For their final task, the old woman gives Sign a bucket of polish and tells everyone to follow her into the woods to find the statues she wants him to polish. The four of them trail behind the grouchy old woman into the woods and chat about the old heroes whose statues have been forgotten. Eventually, they arrive, and Frieren struggles to remember who the statue represents. After a closer look, Stark figures out that the guy on the far right is Kraft, the elf they discovered during that brutal winter, but they can't seem to identify the guy on the left. Seeing those statues brings back memories for Sign, and he recalls the first time Hyder brought his younger self and his buddy, Guerrilla Warrior, who was his friend back then. Hyder had just warned them how easy it is for past heroes to be forgotten, so his friend picked the nickname Guerrilla Warrior, while Hyder called Sign Goatee Priest. Once he snaps back to reality, the stubborn old woman finally mentions how much his friend talked about him and their plans to become heroes together. By the end of the day, Sign leaves the village feeling a bit down because he just learned that his buddy is in Tour, a trading city that's across from the big city they were headed to. Sign feels a little lost about what to do now that he knows this, since he doesn't want to leave his new crew just yet. Stuck trying to figure things out, Sign takes a moment to chill and think his next words through. Eventually, time runs out, and as the sun goes down, Stark heads back to the village, grabbing one of the cabins so they can crash there and be ready to travel with or without Sign the next morning. That night, Sign and Fern head out to gather firewood and get some snacks. But when they come back, Fern's hands are freezing. Frieren and Stark check them out and are surprised at just how cold they are. Fern jokingly puts her cold hands on Stark's cheeks, making him blush. After that little moment, Frieren and Fern realize winter has officially hit. Instead of freaking out, Frieren stays cool and tells Fern they can still trek through the snow as long as there aren't any crazy blizzards. The very next morning, a heavy blizzard slams the area, and the village chief warns them against heading out into the savage winds since they could get stuck in the snowstorm for a whole month. To keep them safe and warm, he lets them stay in the cabin for an extended time so they can relax. Frieren is pumped, especially when she learns there's a magic shop run by a quirky old dude in the village. This means she gets to check out all sorts of legendary spells and chase her life goals. She then talks about a few spells she's found over time and encourages everyone to head back inside to chill for the rest of the month. Over the next few weeks, life goes on. Fern and Stark grow closer every day, while Sign spends most of his time at the tavern, drinking away. About a month later, Sign is just hanging out at the tavern when Frieren shows up and asks him to come back to the cabin to help sort out a dumb fight between Stark and Fern. Sign groans in annoyance and heads back to the cabin, where he finds Stark all upset and crying like a baby. To figure things out quicker, Sign pulls Stark into a private room to chat. In there, Stark admits Fern's mad at him just because he touched her cheeks with his bare hands. Sign scoffs and gives Stark a mini lecture on how to treat women. After schooling him for a minute, he tells the poor guy to go back and apologize to Fern. Stark promises to do just that and leaves the room, letting Fern come in for her turn. Sign tells her she crossed a line by yelling and getting mad at Stark. Fern acknowledges it, saying she only reacted that way because Stark wasn't gentle. He grabbed her shoulder with his big warrior hands, and that kinda scared her. Sign asks Fern if she has feelings for Stark, and she admits she does. So, he urges her to go back and apologize for being a jerk. Soon after, Fern and Stark make up and get on good terms again. Next, we find Sign in the tavern, feeling frustrated with Frieren sitting across from him. She completely brushes off his mood swings and thanks him for sorting out the fight between Stark and Fern. Sane chuckles and asks Frieren why she tried to force him to travel with them. She smiles and says it's because she wanted to give him a reason to live, just like Himmel did for her the first time they met. Then she asks Sign if he regrets joining them, and he says not at all. After a long night of drinking, Sign steps outside to smoke and think about what to do next. He reflects on all the memories with Frieren and her crew, comparing them to the good times he had with his buddy in the past. This helps him figure out what to do next. When he wakes up the next day, he's ready to move. Frieren and her crew gear up too, wanting to keep up. When it's decision time, Sign finally decides to go track down his buddy in Tur. He says goodbye to his new friends, promising he'll find them again someday before he kicks the bucket. As the hopeful young priest walks away, he reminisces about the moments he shared with Frieren's party but starts feeling bored traveling solo. A few days after splitting up, Frieren and her crew hit the Offen mountain range up north and set up camp in a little cave. One morning, Stark wakes up early to grab stuff for breakfast. When he gets back, he finds the girls still asleep, so he cooks up some food before waking them. After calling their names a couple of times, Stark feels something's off. He checks on Fern and sees she's got a fever. As for Frieren, the lazy elf is just snoozing away. Luckily, Stark nudges her awake to let her know about Fern. Once Frieren realizes her favorite mage is sick, she digs through her bag until she finds a pamphlet from Sign that has herbs they need to get Fern better. Stark asks if the Holy Scripture is the only book for checking illnesses, and Frieren pulls it out from under their breakfast pot. Then, she uses the magic from the book to figure out that Fern just has a fever. To get herbs, Frieren takes Stark to a nearby town while Stark carries Fern the whole way. Once they arrive, they spot a woman milking cows. After they get comfy, Frieren asks where to find the cherry blossom icicle tree, and the woman says it's north. Frieren thanks her and holds Fern's hands once the woman leaves. Stark asks why she keeps doing that, and Frieren explains it helps Fern calm down and heal faster. Fern, awake at that moment, gets embarrassed and scolds Frieren for treating her like a kid in front of Stark. Frieren apologizes and leaves with Stark to go get the cherry blossoms. On their way, Frieren complains about Fern growing up too quickly but pushes it aside to focus on getting the herbs. Over the next few hours, they travel a long way to find the tree. Somewhere along the way, Stark asks if that tree is the last thing they need, and Frieren says they'll just need the mushrooms at the base. After more traveling, they finally spot the gorgeous cherry tree. Before picking the herbs, Stark asks Frieren again about holding Fern's hands. Frieren says it's her way of easing Fern's pain. She then asks Stark what else she could have done, and he says she did the right thing. He mentions something that triggers a memory of Himmel caring for a sick Frieren, and once she snaps back to reality, they chat for a bit before getting to work on those white mushrooms. When they return to camp, Frieren makes a soup with the herbs and feeds it to Fern the next morning. While that's going on, Stark helps the woman milk the cows, and Fern eats her soup. A few days later, Fern fully recovers and thanks her buddies as well as the woman for their help. Once they pack up, they're off to Oberst, the magical city. Weeks later, they finally spot the huge magical city on the horizon. Even though they've still got a few miles to go, Frieren and her crew can chill now that they're so much closer to Oriel. As they head down the hills to catch a carriage, the trio chat about mage exams, with Fern asking Frieren if she can take the first-class mage test for her, since she doesn't think she's strong enough for that tough task. Frieren responds that she probably won't need the certification for long because she can't keep coming back to the Holy City every 50 years just to renew it. Stark then gets curious and asks why they need such a powerful mage to cross the northern plateau. Frieren explains that they need someone strong to protect them from the weird monsters that hang out up there. Once they hop on the carriage, they keep chatting until Frieren gets annoyed when Fern calls her an old mage. Eventually, she stops talking and crashes on Fern's lap. Unfortunately, she can't see the whole sky because Fern's boobs are just too big. Then she gets up and starts giving Fern some friendly mage tips that leave Stark a bit surprised and confused. After she wraps up her advice, she talks about how many times she's lost to creatures with lower mana just to make her point. After hearing her, the two go quiet. Miles away, near the edge of Grafgranat's territory, a strange-looking mage is complaining about the long trip to Oberst. She knows she's being followed but stays chill and waits for them to reveal themselves. When they do, they threaten to take her out if she doesn't hand over her staff. Before she can fight back, Kraft, the elf from earlier, shows up and chases them off. After saving her from the bandits, Kraft introduces himself to Ubel, a bored mage mage nearby. Once they get to know each other, Kraft picks up on her bloodlust and decides it's best not to mess with it. He tells her he knows about the kills she made before and doesn't want to get involved in other people's drama. Ubel gets tired of him and moves on to Oberst. Once Kraft realizes she's going there for the exam, he remembers Frieren and wishes her luck. In the next scene, Frieren and her friends visit the Continental Magic Association in Oberst to get the scoop on the first-class mage test. The receptionist reads out the requirements, and Frieren bolts after hearing them, wishing Fern good luck. Fern quickly grabs her, begging her not to leave just yet. Frieren pulls out her holy emblem and asks if that will help. An old man spots the emblem, calls Frieren back, and takes a look at it. Once he sees it's the real deal, he tells Frieren she should go for the first-class mage exam, even though she's not officially allowed to take it. That night, Frieren and Fern chat about the power the holy emblems hold. Somewhere in the conversation, Frieren mentions that even 80 years ago, her teammates, Himmel and the rest, didn't realize how important the necklace was. Still, Fern and Stark assure her she's an amazing mage. The next day, the trio checks out the big library to study for the upcoming exam. They discover there are currently 2,000 registered mages across the continent, and only 45 of them are first-class mages. Also, this exam only happens once every 3 years, and usually, hardly anyone passes because the risk is high, and it's really tough. Plus, with peace around, there's not much need for mages, so not many people put in the effort to reach such a prestigious rank. For now, though, Frieren suggests she and Fern train hard for the next 2 months to be ready for the exam, and that's exactly what they do. On exam day, the first test proctor, Mage Janao, greets the examinees and goes over some instructions before they kick off the first task. 2 other proctors are off to the side, checking out the magical skills of the strongest mages in the crowd. After mentioning a few impressive names, including Ubel's, they turn to Frieren and underestimate her mana, calling her an old mage. When it comes down to it, Janao lays out the rules for the first test. He splits all 57 participants into teams of 3 and explains how they'll find each other. Frieren puts on her bracelet and uses her mana to locate her teammates in the crowd. She walks over to find them, only to see the 2 goofballs bickering like crazy. Once it's time for the first test, the examiner takes them to a grassy field for the challenge. Each team gets a cage to catch a rare bird called Still, and must return with one in the cage the next day. Plus, they need to keep all their team members together throughout the test. If anyone leaves the barrier during the exam, the whole team fails instantly. After they get the instructions, the test kicks off. For the first half, Frieren has to keep an eye on the 2 fools squabbling over who gets to hold the bird cage. After a quick game of rock, paper, scissors, Lewin, the smarter one, gets to hold it. Kan, who's also a third-class mage like her partner, walks behind Frieren, who takes the lead. Frieren chats with the girls a bit before asking if they know about Still. When they say no, she suggests they find one and observe it. After searching for a few more hours, Kan gets tired and takes a break, while Lewin decides to go scout and return with any good intel. Frieren asks if she trusts her abilities, and Lewin says she does. With that settled, Frieren lets her go but warns her to watch out for dangers from above. Kan praises her leadership skills and asks what she meant about being cautious of the skies. Frieren wonders if Kan is slow, but before she can reply, Lewin comes back and leads them to where she spotted Still. When they get there, Kan and Lewin team up to trap the bird in an icicle they conjured with magic. Frieren tells them to prepare for what's next, and before they know it, the bird takes off at full speed and escapes. Frieren explains how fast the bird can fly and tells them that catching one will need some careful watching. As they dry their hair, Frieren finally feels confident about her teammates' skills. A minute later, they keep fighting and observing the still birds around them. By night, Kan wakes up and notices Frieren's sleeping bag is empty. She hears the faint sound of rain and wonders where the mage is. Eventually, she searches everywhere until she stumbles into a monster bird's lair and gets attacked. Caught off guard, Kan lets the bird overwhelm her and even loses her staff. Frieren shows up just in time to help her out. After saving her, she asks Kan why she relies so much on someone like Lewin if she doesn't like her. Kan responds that she's always been a coward and can't act when it really matters. She feels like a spoiled kid who never had the guts to do tough stuff. Someone like Lewin, who's had a rough life, is just what she needs to get over her silly tantrums and make things happen. She then shares a story about her first time learning to fly. Lewin had to coddle her before pushing her off a cliff. Kan probably wouldn't even know she could fly if it weren't for that shove. Kan says some nice things about Lewin and shares her recent findings with Frieren, hoping they can put them to good use. After their quick meet-up by the cliff, Frieren and Kan head back to sleep. Later on, Frieren watches the girls snooze and remembers a time with Himmel and the crew 80 years ago when Himmel tried to chill out Eisen by pretending he was just as scared. That night, Hyder said something that really stuck with Frieren. After reliving that memory, she gazes at the girls before getting back to her own stuff. Meanwhile, Fern and her crew have already snagged their still bird, but now comes the tough part, keeping it safe from anyone wanting to steal it. Super early the next morning, Frieren and the girls get up to go over what they learned from watching the birds earlier. It's clear that these birds are crazy fast and can pick up on mana. They're tough too, and just regular magic won't stop them because they'll sense the mana in an attack before it even leaves the mage's staff. If that's not enough, Stillas don't have mana, so they can't be detected using mana sensing. These issues are just scratching the surface of how hard it'll be to catch one if they even find one. Then, Frieren shows them a bird-catching spell she learned a while back, and mentions she used it to catch a monster that almost got her the night before. Kan thanks her again, and Lewin asks why Frieren didn't use that spell on the stillies from yesterday. Frieren explains that the magic only works within a 50-centimeter range, and since they couldn't get that close before, she couldn't have made it work. At this point, the two girls finally realize they're facing a big setback. Moving on, Frieren asks the girls to share a bit about their magical abilities. Kan kicks it off by talking about the limits of her water magic. Turns out, the spoiled kid can only control water, not make it out of thin air, and since the barrier keeps rain from coming in, she can only use her magic near big bodies of water. Even then, she has to put her mana in that water first, so she can control it when needed. If she does that, the still will catch her mana and probably steer clear of the watering hole. Hearing "stay away" sparks an idea in Frieren. After listening to Lewin's ice magic limitations, which aren't super relevant right now, she shares her plans with the girls and takes their suggestions for a bit before they get to work. In the meantime, Lewin and her good buddy still manage to bicker before buckling down. Meanwhile, Fern and her buddies, Land and Ubel, are hiding inside a big hollow tree trunk, laying low until the test starts. This plan isn't familiar to Ubel, but she goes along with the kind kid. Moments later, they realize they're out of water, so they head to a nearby lake to grab some. On their way, Land is pumped about finally getting a bird. Ubel, who's tuning him out, feels the ground and realizes something weird. They're walking through a dry riverbed, and with the barrier blocking water, it means the only reliable water source is the big lake in the test area. Unfortunately, the test participants are living beings that also need water, so there's a good chance they'll bump into some at the lake. Realizing what's at stake, Land, the quiet kid, gives up on finding water and decides to look for a smaller pond instead. But before they can get far, the 8th party Sharf, Era, and Ribel, all sharp Magus launches a surprise attack on them. Fern reacts just in time to block a dangerous strike, making a strong first impression on their attackers. After some chatter, Werbel demands Ubel hand over the still they've got. Just before they can act, there's a loud bang coming from the direction of the lake. At first, the group is confused, not knowing what's going on. What they didn't know was that Lewin caused the loud noise while freezing the entire lakeside. The other folks taking the test around the lake noticed, and some tried to melt the ice. After covering the lake in ice, Lewin took off to tackle her next task. Meanwhile, Denkin, a second-class mage from the Empire, analyzed the scene with his crew and pointed out that the adventurers in the second group were clever for leaving a big mana imprint on the lake. This would make the birds steer clear of that spot and look for places with little to no mana. As the battle between Fern and the others continued, Frieren and her team kept searching for other watering holes and ponds to infuse with their mana, so they could thin out the number of places for the stillas to land. On the flip side, Denkin watched as the other groups panicked and acted all crazy when they should have just chilled and waited to figure out Frieren's plan. Instead of being like those fools, Denkin and his buddies, Richter and Laufen, took it easy and strolled around the forest for a bit to dig deeper into Frieren's plan. At one point, they stumbled upon a whole group of dead folks hanging in the trees. After checking it out, Denkin figured they were taken down by flying monsters. He quickly urged them to keep moving, but Laufen asked if they could at least take the bodies down and give them a proper burial. Denkin shot that idea down, saying it was a dumb move, which made Laufen question why the proctors picked such a dangerous spot for their test. Richter explained it was because they believe anyone who dies there isn't fit to be a first-class mage. As they moved on, Denkin slammed the Continental Association of Magic for that silly reasoning. Richter asked why he disliked them so much, and he replied it was because he thinks magic is useless if the caster is a selfish jerk who can't connect with people. Richter called him weak, and Denkin warned him not to go there again. During their search, they found Kan pouring her mana into a small watering hole and rushed to check it out after she left. Denkin realized she had only mixed in a tiny amount of mana before bailing, and he couldn't figure out her reasoning. After thinking for a few moments, he concluded that Frieren's crew must be at a watering hole with no mana in it. Instead of wasting time looking for that one, Denkin decided to rest while still scanning the area for magic activity. Not long after, Kan showed up at one of the mana-free watering holes and found Frieren there with Lewin. After some chatting, Frieren completely hid her mana and sat still to avoid leaking any out. Once the girls got their signal, they dashed off to hide, with Kan complaining about the rain coming down outside the barrier. A few minutes into their little setup, monsters and animals from all around came to drink, preparing to hunt afterward. About an hour later, the first Stilla bird landed on Frieren's shoulder, close enough for her spell to work. Eventually, she captured the bird and put it in a cage before noticing Laufen and Denkin nearby. Before they could take off, Laufen used her high-speed spell to snatch up the bird cage before Frieren could catch on. Meanwhile, Sharf and Era squared off against Land and Fern. In Fern's match, she only used basic attack and defense spells against Era, which really ticked the fiery bird off. Era called Fern's magic old-fashioned, but still felt uneasy every time Fern blocked her magic attack. attacks. As for Ubel, she fought Werbel and held her ground against him. Era praised Werbel for his sneaky magic moves and warned Fern that Ubel would soon be in trouble if Werbel got serious. Speaking of the devil, the next scene has Ubel attacking Werbel instead of following Era's plan. Werbel manages to block most of Ubel's hits until he gets out of the 5-meter range where Ubel can't reach him. At this point, Werbel acts tough and tells Ubel to keep coming at him. This gets Ubel riled up as she dares him to come after her if he's brave enough. Next up, Fern is getting ready to blast Era with a saturation attack spell, and Era gets all smug when she realizes they're just basic spells. But Fern stays chill and fires those spells as quickly as she can until she totally overwhelms Era and blows her up. Literally, a second later, Werbel uses his special spell, Sorganale, to pin Ubel down. Once the spell kicks in, Ubel feels like her joints are locked, making it way harder for her to move. She grins, annoyed with the spell, and questions why the fool in front of her didn't use it to catch a still. Before she can ponder more, Werbel tells her the catch. If he takes his eyes off her for even a second, the spell is broken and she's free. He warns her that he'll end her if she pulls any stunts, but Ubel wonders why he hasn't done that yet. He could have killed her during his sneak attack, but didn't. Before she could pressure him for an answer, Werbel tells her to hand over the bird cage. Ubel almost gives it up when it hits Hirsch. He's not required to take orders from him. Suddenly, she tosses the bird cage into the air and tries to sneak a hit on him when he's not paying attention. Unfortunately, she only grazes his nose, leaving Werbel disappointed in her weak effort. After mumbling some gibberish, he gets ready to finish the job. Ubel notices him waiting and asks for his backstory. Werbel, looking to buy time, shares how it's pretty common for people in the north to send women and kids to fight in wars. Right before he goes to finish her off, he tells her he's been responsible for taking out women and kids for as long as he can remember, so she shouldn't think he'd have an issue with her. After putting up with all his nonsense, Ubel is just waiting for him to get on with it. After an awkward 2 minutes of silence, Ubel asks him if he has the guts to end her or not. When he stays quiet, she figures out that he's actually hesitating to add another kill to his score. Werbel keeps rambling to stall Ubel, but eventually, he runs out of luck and preps himself to do the deed. Just as he's about to strike, Fern shows up and threatens to take him out if he lays a finger on her friends. Werbel is shocked that the one they figured was the weakest actually took down Era. He wonders if Fern is the one who grabbed the bird, and Ubel explains their luck with it. Poor Werbel realizes he's fresh out of luck, especially now that Fern says she took down Era. He thinks it over for a minute, then gives up and heads for his teammate's body. Ubel tries to call him back, but he tells her to chill and just keep focusing on their task. Eventually, everything settles down, and Werbel leaves the girls be. Meanwhile, Land is fighting Sharf in a field of flowers, staying cool as he sizes up his opponent and watches his moves. Sharf, totally clueless about Land's plan, uses his magic to turn flower petals into metal strips and attacks Land with them. After cutting Land's shoulder deep, Sharf lets his guard down and claims he's won. Land just gets back up and starts barking for a few seconds, annoying Sharf at every turn. After a handful of yaps, he threatens to take off Land's head if he doesn't admit defeat. Just then, the real Land pops up behind him and knocks him out to win the fight. Turns out, the Land following the girls was a clone all along, and Sharf had no idea. A little ways off, Werbel finds Era knocked out and wakes her up, joking about her losing to such a basic attack pattern. Era tells him the non-stop attacks were too much for her to handle, and Werbel starts getting worried about the purple-haired weirdo's mana. Eventually, he toughs it out and carries Era on his back like a little kid. After walking a bit more, they find Sharf lying in a field of flowers. Werbel grumbles as he lifts Sharf up. With about 3 hours left until sunset, he's pretty much given up on getting anything done, especially now that 2 of his teammates are out. Soon, it starts to rain outside the barrier, and Werbel gets anxious about what's coming next. He complains a bit, and Era playfully teases him for acting all fancy when he's really a nice guy deep down. Werbel tells her he's been fighting the bad guys to keep a promise he made to a little girl 29 years back. Back then, demons were wreaking havoc up north, forcing the girl's family to move to Central Lands. On the last day he saw her, young Werbel promised to fend off the demons and help her family return home. Even now, he can't remember her face or voice, but he knows he owes her something. After hearing this, Era calls him an idiot, and he kind of accepts it as his new title. As they keep moving, they run into a still hanging out on a tree branch. Werbel stays quiet and uses his bird-catching spell to grab the bird effortlessly. This helps the team stay on track while the others are hunting for nothing. Meanwhile, over in another part of the testing area, Frieren and her partner are still locked in a stare-off with Laufen, while Denkin is spying from a tree. As soon as he spots Frieren's ears, he realizes she's an elf. Luckily, Laufen only needs her high-speed spell once to snatch the birdcage from them, and then they're out of there. Just outside the barrier, Proctor Sense shows up to talk to Janao and scolds him for taking out a few people just for the exam. Janao stands up and explains why his test is the way it is, but when Sense mentions that the test takers need luck, he points out that luck is a skill. With sunset creeping in, Janao expects a big fight to break out soon. He figures Denkin Denkin, the powerful Imperial mage, will probably win since he knows how strong that guy can get when pushed. Around that time, Denkin and Richter show up to slow down Frieren and her team to buy Laufin some time to escape. Frieren asks Denkin why they didn't just use Laufin's high-speed spell to catch the still from the start, and the old guy replies it's because Laufin is still inexperienced and might scare the bird away before getting close. Then the chat shifts to Frieren and her accomplishments before she asks why they're being so obvious with their attacks. Richter jumps in and promises to hold off the kids while Denkin battles Frieren, hoping to beat her. Denkin warns Richter not to kill the kids, but then Richter tells the old man to get off his butt. Eventually, Denkin advises him that becoming a first-class mage isn't worth getting himself killed, so he should play it safe. Frieren agrees with Denkin, calling the title just a title. By now, Richter is pretty disgusted with Frieren's ignorance. He lets her know that achieving the title would give that mage access to the great sage and goddess of earth, Saria, who can supposedly grant any spell they want. Basically, mages could gain wealth and power without much cost, but sadly, a lot of first-class mages just ask for ridiculous stuff that makes them look foolish. After his quick history lesson, Richter asks Denkin to hold Frieren back for just a minute so he can take out the kids. Denkin warns him again about trying to kill the kids, and promises to punish him if he pulls any tricks. Richter finally agrees to ease up on his attacks a bit. After that, he uses a spell to separate himself from Frieren, Denkin, and the two girls, so they can fight fair and square. About 1,000 years ago, Flame and Frieren met Saria, the only mage who's said to have read every grimoire out there and can whip up thousands of spells whenever she wants. When they came before the great sage, both Flam and her elf buddies showed their respect, while Frieren wondered who this lady was. After watching Flam step away, Denkin grumbled about younger mages being too eager and hot-headed over this magic privilege thing. Frieren asked why he was saying that, and he explained he believes the real joy of magic comes from the search for it. In the flashback, Saria was impressed that Flam chose Frieren, another elf, as her student. She praised her former student and asked Frieren to name any spell she wanted, and she'd grant it. Hearing this once-in-a-lifetime offer, Frieren turned it down, basically repeating what Denkin just said to her. This annoyed Saria, who then called Flam out, saying Frieren lacked ambition, but Flam stood up for Frieren, saying she's the one who will take down the Demon King and lead them to peace. Saria got even more annoyed, questioning if Flam really thought Frieren could beat the Demon King. Flam got in Saria's head and defended Frieren from all that drama. Once the memory trip was over, Frieren geared up to fight Denkin. Meanwhile, Lewin and Can were throwing coordinated attacks at Richter, who just used his earth magic to block every single one. After figuring out their special abilities, Richter felt let down that these were the kids he had to fight for fun. Lewin and Can got a bit annoyed with his snarky comments, so they tried to retaliate, but Richter schooled them on some basic magic knowledge, and explained why most spells have so many limits. Right after spewing all that, he dropped to his knees, touched the ground, and raised a huge boulder to smack the girls. He hoped they'd stay down, but he was disappointed when they got back up and kept fighting. He warned them not to get any wild ideas to avoid him feeling like he needed to kill them. Lewin tried to bluff that Can could control water in the human body, but Richter saw right through it and told them their threats didn't bother him. In the end, Lewin figured him out. If he was as invincible as he said, he should have chosen a spot with water around. She asked what he was scared of, and he told her to watch her mouth or he'd end them. Meanwhile, Frieren and Denkin were going at it in a battle of endurance for a few minutes until Denkin figured out what Frieren's plan was. He realized that if he didn't wrap this up now, he had no idea what might happen to him. He used more advanced wind and fire spells to trap Frieren in a massive fire tornado, big enough for Janao and Sense, who were outside the barrier, to notice. After discussing it a bit, Sense told Janao she noticed someone checking out the barrier the day before. Janao told her not to stress about it, as that person was just wasting their time. They didn't believe anyone could be more powerful than the Great Sage. After summoning the tornado, Denkin gets hit with a whole bunch of attacks that he blocks easily and even fights back. He realizes he's not going to win when Frieren swoops in and drains all his remaining mana. With him on the ground, Frieren threatens to off him if he doesn't spill where Laufin is. Denkin stays quiet, but then Frieren figures out Laufin is nearby. She calls for the rookie to come out with their still so she can get it back and let them go. If not, she'll take Denk down. Laufin, hiding just a few inches away, weighs her options and thinks about using her speedy spell, Jilwer, to grab the old man and make a run for it without Frieren seeing her. Denkin warns her not to fall for Frieren's trap since he knows the mage won't kill him, but Laufin goes for it and ends up getting caught by Frieren, who ties them up and takes her bird back. Once they're tied to a tree, Laufin asks the old man why he's so hell-bent on being a top-tier mage. He says it's just so he can get into a certain village to visit an old friend's grave. Switching gears, Denkin asks Frieren what she plans to do with the kids now that Richter knows he's lost. Frieren stays chill and tells Denkin that Lewin and Can will win, so there's nothing to worry about. Now that she's finished checking the barrier, she can finally help the girls beat that arrogant jerk. As Frieren sets to break the barrier, Richter keeps being a pain in the neck for the girls. After nearly taking them out a bunch of times, Frieren finally casts a spell to break the barrier. Janao and Sense see a bright green light shining from the testing area and can't believe what they're seeing. But when Frieren breaks the barrier, Janao learns the name of the mage who did it and realizes she's the last great mage. Serie, several miles away, also picks up on Frieren's magic and welcomes her back to life. After witnessing Frieren achieve the impossible, Denkin asks her why she broke the barrier, and she says it's to help Can control the water in the rain and take Richter down. Meanwhile, Richter sees the barrier's gone and tries to keep fighting like it's no big deal. By then, Lewin's got him pinned with ice magic while Can controls a huge wave of water heading right for him. All Richter can do is watch as the big wave washes him down to where Denkin and Laufen are. Frieren gets her girls back and tells them to keep hiding for the next 2 hours until the test ends. Richter mopes about his stupidity and keeps sulking until Denkin tells them they still have options. He tells Richter to break the tree they're tied to, and he actually does it. Moving on, Denkin encourages his team not to give up yet, saying they need to find every single trace of other teams and maybe swipe the still from them. Meanwhile, Ubel complains to Fern about the basic spells she usually casts and asks about other spells she can use. As they chat, Land warns Fern not to show all her tricks, since they might end up being enemies in the next test. Elsewhere, Denkin and his crew find another team that lost a member but still has their still. After thinking about what to do with them, Denkin makes his move and shows up. Almost out of mana, he approaches them with a serious vibe and decides to settle things with their fists. When the rain finally stops, the other teams chill out and wait for the test to end. In the end, only 18 out of 57 made it through. After giving them a quick rundown of the next test starting in 3 days, Janao sends them off. Later that night, Stark is at the bar chilling without the girls. The next evening, Stark gets woken up by a knock on the door. At first, it's just a soft knock, so he brushes it off. But soon, the knocking gets way more aggressive, and he finally gets up to see who the annoying person is. To his surprise, he opens the door and finds Fern and Frieren waiting there. He asks if the first test is over. Fern tells him it's done and that they've been around since last night. Stark feels a bit down because he knows what's coming. Fern asks if he was awake all night, and Stark admits he was. Then she asks if he's been sleeping this whole time, and Stark keeps making it obvious he has been. Eventually, Fern gets mad at both Frieren and Stark for sleeping in and wasting her time. To calm her down, they have to spend the rest of the day making Fern happy. So, they head out and walk around until Frieren finally decides to take Fern to a nice restaurant she used to go to with Himmel and the gang about 80 years ago. Stark wonders if they can afford it since it's pretty pricey, but Frieren says it's not a big deal. Meanwhile, Richter is working on fixing a magic lamp for an old lady in what looks like his magic shop. After he gets it working, she thanks him and gives him some sugar as a reward. Richter flips out, telling the old woman not to treat him like a kid. He keeps the sugar, but just as he's about to go back inside, Denkin and Laufen show up to say hi. Richter knows they're not on a team anymore, so he tells them to leave him alone. But Denkin invites him to grab a bite at a restaurant they've been trying to find for a while. Richter asks Laufen why she's still hanging around with the old man, and she says it's because he bought her some donuts. Richter is super annoyed because he just wants to get back to his work. Denkin tells him he's being rude and that he should enjoy life a bit. It won't hurt anyone. After hearing that, Richter tells Denkin to eat wherever he wants. However, Denkin mentions he used to go to that same restaurant with his late wife, which makes Richter change his mind and agree to go with them. Meanwhile, Land is walking through a dark, empty alley in the city when he stops to watch a mother cat and her kitten reunite after being apart for days. After that, Ubel shows up and joins him. Once they get past the small talk, Land asks Ubel why she didn't just kill Werbel during their fight, since she usually doesn't hesitate to take people out. Ubel finds it tough to explain at first, but after a quick memory jog, she says it's because she feels for him. Before long, she pins Land down with Werbel's Sorganale spell and explains how it works. Turns out, Ubel has this strange ability to use the signature spells of people she connects with, which is why she didn't kill Werbel. Then, she tries to get Land to spill his backstory so she can feel sorry for him and learn how to make perfect clones of herself. Land sees right through her annoying tactic and calls her out for being foolish and using other people's magic without understanding what it really means. In the end, he tells her she won't get anything from him, so if she wants to kill him, she should go ahead. Ubel changes her mind and lets him go so he can keep moving. This time though, she makes sure to follow him until he eventually gives in and tells her what she wants to know. As night falls, Denkin and his crew finally spot the restaurant they've been hunting for. Denkin recognizes it as the place he used to go with his late wife, and after chatting for a few more seconds, he heads inside. Once they're in, they see Frieren and her friends checking out the menu, so they decide to kick back and enjoy their meals without any drama. When the food arrives, Stark gets Omurus, while Frieren and Fern go all out with a bunch of meat and desserts. As they dig in, Frieren remembers the last time she visited a restaurant like this with her old pals. Back then, they were blown away by how delicious the food was, so much so that the head chef was called over to be thanked by the heroes. Frieren is stuffing her face because she didn't think she'd ever taste such awesome flavors again. At that moment, the head chef promises her that the restaurant will stick around for the next 200 years, still dishing out those same tasty flavors. Fern and Stark are thrilled to enjoy such a treat, at least once in their lives, and ask Frieren if anyone deserves to be this happy. Just then, Ubel and Land are seen eating at the same restaurant like nothing's wrong. After they finish, Frieren and her group leave the restaurant and head home. The next morning, Stark is meditating on the edge of town when an old guy suddenly appears and starts giving him life advice. Soon after, Frieren shows up and asks Stark who the old man is. Stark admits he has no clue since the guy only shows up when he's training. They brush that off, and Frieren invites Stark to help calm down Fern since she's mad at her again. Stark asks what happened this time, and Frieren explains it was her turn to go shopping that morning, but she overslept and missed the good sales. Now, Fern is super angry and won't even look at her. Frieren begs Stark to step in and smooth things over with this furious chick. Summoning some courage, Stark asks Fern how to make it right. Fern tells him to grab her some snacks, and he complains about how bratty she's been lately. With no other options, Stark takes Frieren to the snack store to get some treats for Fern. Meanwhile, Can is on a balcony watching Werble and Sharf mess with some random guy and wonders what's going on. Luckily, nothing too crazy happens as Leween shows up dressed like a spoiled noble. Can calls her cute, and Leween explains it's because her dumb brothers always buy her stuff she doesn't even need. Can goes all out to treat Leween like a proper noble, which just makes Leween pull Can's hair out. Next up, Stark and Frieren are at the snack store with Fern, who is taking her sweet time picking something out. Stark tells her to hurry up, and she suggests he pick for her. A few minutes later, Leween and Can show up and are happy to see Frieren. After grabbing snacks for their upset friend, the five of them head back to the inn, where Stark gets to know them better. Just when he thinks his day couldn't get any worse, Werble and Sharf roll in, checking Stark out. Once they see he has all the skills they need, they recruit him as their frontliner to take on a Fresser wrecking the crops. Werble gets Fern's okay, and she quickly agrees. So, Werble drags Stark along, and the girls go back to the inn. There, the two girls give Fern a box of snacks to thank her for helping them advance to the second test. Frieren remembers a time with Himmel when he helped a random girl and learned something from him. Himmel told her to change someone's life so she could be remembered as a hero too. Over the next few hours, she enjoys hanging out with the girls and finally gets Fern to smile again. Just then, Leween pipes up, reminding Frieren how long it took her to wake up on the second day. Frieren tells her to shut the hell up, but then a messenger bird shows up with news about the next test. Unfortunately for them, the proctor for the next test is Sense. And if there's one thing they know about Sense, it's that her tests are super tough. Around the same time, the others get notified about the next test. After seeing how hard her test is, Janao complains that she's setting a crazy challenge, but Sense reassures him that hers doesn't involve killing anyone. The next day, all the folks taking the second test gather at the entrance of the King's Tomb ruins in the north to get the lowdown on the test before they kick it off. When Sense, the proctor for the second test, shows up, she calls everyone's attention and welcomes them to the spot for the test. After clearing up some wild rumors about how dangerous her test is, Sense dives into the details. To pass the test, contestants need to raid the King's Tomb behind her and make it to the bottom of the dungeon while dodging any traps and obstacles they encounter. If they can do that, they pass. Before moving on, one of the baldy guys in the group asks if she's planning to make everyone fail again, since that's her reputation. Sense gets a bit annoyed at his question and tells him that first-class mages are the ones who make the impossible happen, so he shouldn't expect hand-holding. Just then, another person asks how they'll prove they made it to the bottom. Sense says she'll be tagging along with a group of her choice all the way down, but will try not to interfere. When she gets down there, she'll announce who passed. She also hands out special golem bottles to everyone to keep them safe. If anyone gets into a tight spot, they should break the bottle and let the golem pull them back to the entrance. But anyone using the bottle to save themselves will fail automatically, that's the deal. When she finishes explaining, she tells them the bottles will shatter at dawn the next day, ending the test. After that, she sends everyone off to start. For the first hour, no one goes into the dungeon. They're all too busy chatting about strategies. Denkin sticks with Richter and Laufen this time, trying to get everyone to team up to clear the dungeon. As always, there's that one jerk who messes it up for everyone, and a clueless person pipes up, shooting down Denkin's efforts to unite the group. After spouting nonsense for a few minutes, he heads into the dungeon solo. Shortly after, people start heading in, some in pairs, others in threes. A bit later, Frieren and Fern get ready to start. Fern asks Frieren why she doesn't just wait and join another team. Frieren says it's because there's no way to collaborate anymore. When Sense spots Frieren, she decides to walk with her team. Over time, Frieren and Fern work on mapping out the dungeons, exploring before heading to the lower levels. After helping Sense avoid a trap, Frieren and Fern chat about Himmel's love for dungeons. In that moment, Frieren reminisces about one of her boring memories with Himmel during a dungeon run. After recalling the wise words of that so-called hero, Frieren asks Fern what she thinks. Fern just sighs and keeps quiet for the rest of their journey. A few hours later, Denkin and his crew see the last group, Leween and Can, head into the dungeon. With only 5 of them left, Denkin decides to make the best of what he has to pass the test. When he complains about about everyone's foolishness for not teaming up, Richter gives him another view of the situation. Eventually, the old man stands up and gets serious about the test. A little while later, Frieren stumbles on a weird treasure chest and gets super excited, thinking there's a rare grimoire inside. Knowing it's actually a mimic, Fern tries to warn her elf master, but stubborn Frieren ignores her. Instead, she sticks her head inside the treasure and gets stuck in the mimic's jaws. A minute later, it hits Frieren, and she starts screaming for help. Fern tries to pull her out of the mimic box. Sense, who's been watching them the whole time, starts to regret ever thinking they could handle this test. In the next scene, Denkin and his crew are sailing through the dungeons like it's a walk in the park. After dodging a couple of traps, they hit a trickier level. Just when they're about to open the door to the next floor, the gargoyle statues guarding it spring to life and attack. Denkin and his crew do their best to fend off the wild gargoyles, with some of them managing to dodge and smash a few. Unfortunately, one of the crew members gets caught up in the chaos and gets tossed into a room surrounded by crushing spike walls. As the door seals shut, those walls start closing in on her. Once Denkin finishes with the gargoyles, he tries to break down the door, but no luck. Then he tells the girl to break her golem bottle, and she does just that. A few seconds later, the golem busts through the trap door and carries her back up to safety. Meanwhile, Fern gets fed up with dragging Frieren along and decides to change things up. She shoves Frieren into a treasure box, which makes the box choke and spit her out. While Fern fixes her hair, Frieren shares some insights about her previous experiences there. After they clean up, they carry on deeper into the dungeon. Along the way, they run into some gargoyles and take them out before moving to the next floor. Just when they're about to reach the bottom, Frieren takes a moment to check out all the magical junk she's collected so far. During their break, Sense asks Fern for help in understanding her better. Despite being the youngest third-class mage ever, Sense doesn't see any drive or passion in Fern and doesn't get why. Fern sighs and explains that the only reason she became a mage was to keep a promise to Hyder, but now that she's here, she's not feeling all that pumped anymore. Sense presses her to share what motivates her, and Fern admits she's still doing it just to make Frieren happy. Hearing them open up like that makes Sense really happy to be along for the ride. Elsewhere, Werble and his crew end up in a tight spot in the dungeon and can feel something's off. Before they can figure it out, someone hits Era with Sorganale and goes after the other two. Werble manages to block the attack and tells Sharf to cover the enemy's line of sight. Once they do that, the enemies finally reveal themselves. Turns out, these enemies are exact copies of the three of them, and it dawns on Werble why nobody ever passed the second test. At the same time, Denkin's team runs into the same foes, but quickly outsmarts and takes them down before they can hurt anyone else. Afterward, Denkin checks out the magical replica and helps everyone realize how dangerous these fakes are. The one good thing about them is they're easy to spot compared to the originals, but they all know they still have a tough road ahead. They chat for a few minutes before getting up and heading to the boss's room. What they find beyond the door is totally unexpected. Before they know it, they're staring at a replica of Frieren. If they apply everything they've learned so far, they'll see that this fake is super strong. Denkin has his crew get ready for what's coming next, so they don't get caught off guard. In the next scene, Janao is hanging out with his partner at their office, chatting about the dungeon lord, Spiegel, who's this water mirror monster. Janao mentions that Spiegel is a creature from some legendary tales told by Ewig the Sage. Right now, they think Spiegel can read the memories of anyone who steps into the dungeon and creates perfect copies of them. Nowadays, Einsam is the only monster that's even close to being like Spiegel. At one point, Janao's partner asks why Sense picked such a place for her test. Janao explains that she knows beating yourself takes calm, cool thinking, which suits a pacifist like her. Luckily, she's got safety measures to avoid unnecessary deaths. Next up, Denkin and his crew bail out of the boss room when the Frieren clone starts attacking. Once they're outside, they brainstorm a way to tackle their new problem. Meanwhile, Land and Yubel are huddled together at a dead end. Turns out, Land was hurt pretty badly by a clone of Yubel. Yubel, not caring much about Land's injury, asks for tips on figuring out if her clone is as perfect as it seems. She spots her clone chilling down the hall after turning a corner. Before answering her, Land drops a few hints about Yubel and suggests how her clone isn't so perfect. Once Yubel gets what he's saying, he starts explaining the attack moves of the clone, also pointing out that the clone thinks just like her. As their chat wraps up, Yubel notices the blood pooling under Land's wound, but before feeling sorry for him, she asks if he's the real Land or not. Land plays it cool, and Ubel tries to help by getting him to use her golem bottle, so he doesn't end up kicking the bucket. But Land turns her down and tries to make her see reason, just as Yubel suddenly goes after her clone and fights to get Land's bottle back. During the first half of her showdown with her clone, Ubel keeps up the attack while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When she sees it, she lets her clone put her in a hold with Sorganale. Just then, the real Land shows up and the clone gets sidetracked. Yubel takes that chance to slice the fake in half and win the fight. After it's over, she steps closer to the injured Land, a bit shocked to find out it was just a clone. Soon, the real Land comes over and asks Yubel why she fought for the bottle back if she knew the one that was dying was a clone. tone. Lan thought Yubel was being nice, but she explains her clever plan, which annoys Land a little. In the end, Yubel thanks Land for helping her learn more about him, and Land asks if she can relate to him yet. When she says no, they keep moving. After going down a few more floors, Freyren randomly stops to check out a hidden room she can sense. Fern and Sense are like, stop goofing around and let us finish the test. But Freyren trusts her intuition more than anything, so she messes with the mechanism until she finally manages to open the door to the hidden room. When the door is wide open, the trio walks in to check out the tomb of a special king from the Unified Dynasty era. They pause to admire the murals on the walls and leave once they're done. A few floors down, they finally spot Denkin and his crew hanging out at the entrance to the boss room. Freyren asks why they're just chilling there. Denkin helps her peek into the room beyond the door, and Freyren sees her replica waiting in the middle for her first challenger. Excited to see herself recreated, she syncs minds with the guys to figure out her weaknesses. Richter throws out the idea of using restraint or hypnosis magic against her, but sadly, Freyren resists both. Not to worry though, as Denkin thinks using that magic can still open up a chance for the real Freyren to attack. To see what the magic can do, Denkin has Methode try her spells on Freyren. Methode uses both restraint and hypnosis magic, only to find out Freyren was telling the truth. After her analysis, Methode suggests finding someone among them who specializes in hypnosis magic to help Freyren. Denkin asks if she knows anyone, and she mentions Edel, a non-combat mage skilled in hypnosis. The downside? Edel is pretty weak and her magic only works on beings with their own minds. Up until now, they have no idea if these replicas actually have minds. Denkin sighs, realizing they're lacking a lot of info. In the next scene, Edel and her crew are hiding from what looks like Sense's replica. After hiding their mana for so long, Edel still feels she can't do much to save her teammates, Blay and Dunstay, against the wild replica. She thinks she must try using her hypnosis magic on it, if the thing has a mind of its own. But if not, she's pretty much useless. She sizes up the replica standing a few meters away and makes her deductions. Shortly after, she tells her teammates to just give up and head home to retry in 3 years. But Blay suggests she tries using her hypnosis on the replica. Edel lets them know that even though her family's hypnosis magic isn't the greatest, she can still make the replica kneel if she makes eye contact and has 15 seconds to activate the spell. Just as she's talking, the crazy replica spots them and attacks first. To buy herself those 15 seconds, Edel tells her team to set up a barrier to block all of the replica's attacks while she completes the spell. Blay and Dunstay get to work and manage to block the replica's barrage. Unfortunately, their barrier doesn't hold for long, and the replica takes it down quickly. With the barrier gone, Edel makes eye contact with the monster and orders her to kneel. At that moment, the replica lunges at her, wounding her in the chest. That's when Edel realizes the replicas don't have their own minds. She decides to use her escape bottle and ditches her teammates to join other teams. Soon after, a golem appears and carries her to the surface. Meanwhile, the rest keep descending, and Denkin and his crew decide to take down Freyren's replica using brute force. As the battle between Werble and his replicas rages on, Werble finds himself loving the fight so much he defeats Era by collapsing the ceiling on her, exposing the other two. Hearing everything Denkin just said, Fern steps up to fight the Freyren replica, and everyone else instantly agrees. With that settled, Freyren and the crew start talking about the best ways to take down her replica. The only crucial info they're missing now is whether the replica actually has its own mind. Luckily, before they jump the gun, a wounded Dunsta shows up and shares what he learned from Edel. The team quickly notices him and rushes to help. Before treating his injuries, they ask about his teammates, Edel and Blay. Dunst explains that Edel had to use her bottle to bail on the test, while Blay stayed behind to stall Sense's replica so he could escape. Hearing this, Dunstay tells the crew he's got useful info but needs to know they won't stab him in the back. Denkin promises him and has Methode take care of his wounds before they start planning. Once Methode stops the bleeding, Dunstay spills Edel's discovery to the group. The replicas can only pretend to have real minds, they don't actually work like that. This helps the crew save some time chasing dead ends. However, Denkin is still struggling to figure out what the replicas actually are and, more importantly, who made them. Richter tries to tell him that it doesn't matter as long as they find the replica's weaknesses. Lewin and Can show up on the same floor to share what they know about the monster controlling the replicas. Lewin's brother took the test before, so she has some useful intel about the monster creating the replicas. Richter tries to put her down for not teaming up from the beginning, but Lewin honestly tells him she's better off counting stars than teaming up with a selfish jerk like him. To make it worse, she calls Richter an old man, and that hits him right in the feels. Once they get past that, Lewin explains how to take out the replicas for good. She says the Spiegel monster is right behind that door, and if they can take down the Freyren replica in the boss room, they can get to the real monster causing all this chaos. Luckily, the Spiegel monster is pretty weak, so it shouldn't be a problem to take it out. Denkin and the others jot down this important info, but Lewin warns them to hurry because the replicas always have a weird habit of gathering at the bottom of the dungeon over time to attack whoever's there. As the group feels hopeless, Fern steps in with a few questions to check if the replicas share the same weaknesses as the real ones. When Denkin asks asks her where she's going with this. Fern gets up and tells Frieren to move to a wall in the distance. Frieren does it, and Fern hits her hard. Of course, Frieren blocks the attack, but soon Denkin and the others notice a weakness. It turns out Frieren stops sensing mana every time she casts a spell, but she was too embarrassed to admit such a rookie mistake. With this, Fern and the crew start brainstorming a solid plan to take down the Frieren replica. During their talks, Fern sees a smile on Frieren's face and asks her why she looks so happy. Frieren says she's just reminiscing about the old days when she, Himmel, and the other two used to strategize on taking down dungeon bosses and stuff. After another one of those annoying trips down memory lane, they wrap up their strategy meeting. Not long after, Frieren and Fern give the rest of the team their final pep talk before heading into the room to take on the Frieren replica, with Frieren reminding everyone to stay alert and clear out the replicas at the bottom of the dungeon so they don't get surrounded. Once they're ready to go, Frieren and Fern open the door and step into the boss room. After they leave, Denkin moves on to phase 2 of the plan, leaving Frieren and Fern to tackle the tough part. In the boss room, Fern is doing her best to dodge the replica of Frieren's attacks, hiding whenever she gets the chance, while the real Frieren, who's just as strong and clever as her duplicate, is facing off against her. Over the next few minutes, both Frieren and her copy start throwing some wicked spells with killing in mind. During the fight, even the real Frieren remembers just how scary she can be when she actually takes things seriously. Earlier, she had already shown Fern the kind of spell she was supposed to use once she got the right moment to take down the replica. But when Fern hears she should use the Zoltrak spell, she starts to freak out and doubts herself. A little encouragement from Frieren gets her back on track. Eventually, she finds the courage to trust in her skills. Just when she's about to go for it, another annoying flashback interrupts the scene. This flashback goes way back to 1,000 years ago when Flam had just died, and Frieren brought her will to Flam's master, Saria. Saria seemed pretty indifferent about her student's death and read the will without much care. What she finds inside makes her pretty unhappy because she never thought Flam, who was always so carefree, would actually accomplish her goal of getting humans to study magic out in the open. Turns out, before she died, Flam convinced the Emperor to let humans study magic openly. Now she wants Saria to take over and teach magic to humans. This realization really ticks Saria off at Flam for being disrespectful, but then she tells Frieren that Flam's achievement will boost humanity's growth like crazy. She figures that in just 1,000 years, humanity will have enough power to take down the Demon King and do some extraordinary things. After saying that, Saria tears the paper apart, telling Frieren that she's not about to teach magic to just anyone because that would waste her time. Frieren responds that Flam already knew what would happen. Her only goal in sending that letter was to let Saria know she reached her dreams. Just as Frieren is about to leave, Saria stops her and insists they go for a walk together. While they're walking, Saria shares some insights about her master and talks about how useful Flam's favorite spell was, which could create a field of flowers. When Flam was a kid, Saria didn't think much of her. She figured the girl was just too ambitious for her own good. Saria saw Flam's life as too short to really make a mark on the world. Now, she's realized what a determined and focused mind can create. Then she talks about how time works for both humans and elves, and points out how much time has passed since humans built civilization. Now, they just need about 1,000 years to catch up to the elves, and maybe even surpass them. As a parting thought, Saria tells Frieren to never neglect her training because she'll need it every single day of her life. Frieren takes a deep breath as she steps into a new era of mages and human magic. With the flashback over, Fern finally sends out a Zoltrak spell to finish off the replica Frieren. Unfortunately for both Fern and Frieren, the replica deflects Fern's Zoltrak spell and shoots back an even stronger spell to take her down. Luckily, the real Frieren is there to block it. Eventually, she creates a golem to stand strong against her replica while she holds it off. But the replica keeps firing powerful spells and attacks at both Frieren and Fern. That's when Frieren realizes it's turning into a war of attrition. Meanwhile, Richter and Lewin are on the same team, following Denkin's earlier plan. Denkin thinks they can take out all the replicas one by one if they split into 2 or 3 person teams before they all gather in one place. He also has them keep in touch to avoid unnecessary kills and damage. So far, the plan seems to be working since each team finds it easier to take down those annoying replicas than when they're on their own. Still, most of them are uneasy because they haven't seen the replicas of 3 of the strongest mages among them, Sense, Denkin, and Fern. Before they let their guard down, Denkin warns everyone to stay alert. Richter takes a moment to trash talk Sense for being there and making things tougher for them. Sense tells him that if he sees her being there as a problem, then he's not cut out to be a first-class mage. With that, the battle against the replica goes on. Lewin and Richter take it easy after dealing with their fair share of replicas. Just when they're at their most vulnerable, Sense's replica shows up out of nowhere and stabs both of them in the chest. Richter is a bit shocked by Sense's sneaky moves, but he's not about to risk his life for some stupid test. So, he breaks his bottle with Lewin, and they both get whisked away to safety. Denkin arrives just in time to see Richter and Lewin throwing in the towel. He's mad at himself, but knows he won't change anything if he stays. Soon, Ubel and Land show up to check on the creature in front of them. When Ubel Ubel figures out who Denkin is hiding from. She asks him if taking down Sense is necessary to pass the dungeon test. Denkin confirms yes, so she gears up and explains herself to Land, before rushing out to face the replica. Ubel goes to use Real Sidon, a spell that can cut through almost anything she can imagine, to take down the wild replica. Land warns her that cutting through defensive spells like that is risky. Even so, she insists on using her strongest cutting spell. Sense instantly recognizes Ubel's mana, and explains why she thinks this crazy third-class mage will win. 3 years ago, during the second test overseen by Berg, Ubel did something unbelievable. Berg was a first-class mage with solid defensive mana protecting him from various magic attacks. With his unmovable cloak, no one had a chance against his defenses. To pass his second test, he dared anyone to break through, and nobody could figure it out. Finally, when it was Ubel's turn, she just imagined cutting through cloth and used that idea to slice through Berg's clothes and body like it was nothing, killing him in the process. After the test, Ubel was disqualified, but Sense had a chat with her that day before dismissing her to see what was going on in her head. When she asked Ubel how she defeated the impenetrable cloak, Ubel simply told her she used her cutting spell while imagining cutting through fabric with scissors. Sense just sat there, baffled by where this brat came from. Once Ubel finished talking, Sense tried to make sense of what she said. Eventually, she recognizes how differently Ubel thinks, and considers her worthy of being a first-class mage. Sadly, since Ubel is disqualified now, that won't happen, but she can try again in 3 years. Before leaving the office, Ubel asks Sense about her hair and how she cares for it. Sense once confessed that she hated her hair so much that sometimes she just wanted to cut it. Using that info now, Ubel simply cuts all the replica's hair off, killing it in the process. Elsewhere, Werbel and his crew finally meet Methode, who fills them in on what they need to know. As she talks, her mana sensors pick up what went down between Ubel and Sense, so she passes that info to Werbel and the gang. Werbel pledges his loyalty to the team and asks Methode what's next. She spots Denkin's replica and tells Werbel and the team to take care of that one while she tackles Fern's replica. Era gets confused and asks Methode if she's strong enough to handle Fern. Methode assures her she's got some tricks up her sleeve, so not to sweat it. With everything in place, Werbel and his crew get ready to start their mission. Meanwhile, Ubel, Land, and Denkin run into the replicas they've beaten before again. This makes them realize they're in a battle of attrition until Frieren takes down the crazy monster making the replicas. The action heats up over the next few scenes as Methode finally gets to fight Fern. At the same time, Frieren remembers something she told Fern during their strategy meeting about dropping her defense to create an opening, hoping her replica would do the same and give Fern a bigger shot to attack. Fern tries to caution her about how deadly that can be, but Frieren brushes it off, saying she has a plan. With that in mind, Fern keeps an eye on the two powerful mages going at it, unleashing some wicked spells. When Frieren gives Fern the opening she needs, Fern doesn't hesitate to blast a hole in the replica's chest. Even so, it's not enough because the replica bounces back, pins Fern against the wall, and really wounds her this time. Luckily, the replica gets a little distracted and doesn't notice the real Frieren coming for her. In the end, the real Frieren takes out her replica, saves Fern, and moves on to the next door to take down Spiegel. Almost right away, the replicas vanish, and the remaining students pass the test. Sense makes it a point to congratulate them for making it this far, letting them know their achievement won't go unnoticed. When Denkin asks for the stars of the show, they find Frieren and Fern just chilling with the treasure in Spiegel's room. The next day, Fern comes back to Stark hanging out and training on the cliff like he usually does. Stark, looking scared of Fern's angry face, grudgingly lets her sit with him. Before long, he learns what really went down between Fern and Frieren. Turns out, Fern was mad at Frieren for how she talked about her broken staff from their fight with the replica in the ruined king's dungeon. Fern wanted to fix her old staff, but Frieren thought she should just buy a new one. Fern isn't about to toss her old staff aside because Hyder gave it to her, and Frieren knows that. Stark quickly figures out why Fern is upset with her master since the staff is what helps her keep Hyder's memory alive. Meanwhile, Can is seen comforting her friend Lewine, who's feeling down about herself when Frieren walks by. Can and her friend rush over to say hi, but they're stunned to see her with a bag full of broken wood. Before they can ask what's up, the scene cuts to black. In the next scene, Denkin drops by Richter's magic shop, pretending to be a customer but really checking on his old teammate. Richter sees right through his act but plays it cool. As Denkin looks around at the magical items, he asks Richter why he's still running the shop if he's in a bad mood. Richter replies that regular folks gotta earn a living no matter what. Knowing this, Denkin stays quiet and just agrees with everything Richter says about his own failures. Eventually, Richter gets annoyed, and Denkin jokes that he's just a cocky kid who reminds him of his younger self. Even after being dissed by someone younger, Denkin gives Richter some advice, telling him not to lose hope and to work harder for the next test in 3 years. After that, Denkin leaves with Laufen, and Richter just sits there in his shop, staring at the ceiling until Frieren struts in to get Fern's Fern's staff fixed. Richter, already in a bad mood, examines the staff and gives Frieren a hard time before suggesting she just forget about fixing it and get a new one. Frieren, who doesn't get emotions at all, just accepts it and prepares to leave. But then Richter calls her back and decides to fix the staff while Frieren browses around the shop. While working on it, he apologizes for calling the staff useless and speeds up so she can have it back that day. Hours later, Stark and Fern come back to the inn after hanging out all day. On their way home, they chat about how Frieren is trying to understand her better, just as they bump into Richter, who recognizes her from the second test. He tells her to be careful with her staff from now on so it doesn't break again. At this point, Fern rushes home to find her staff all fixed and waiting on her bed. She remembers something Hyder said about Frieren trying to understand human emotions and appreciates the effort Frieren put into understanding her attitude. With that, she sets down her staff and shows her master some love. The next day, all 12 contestants for the third test show up at the testing place to witness the final test that will turn them into top-notch mages. Just before the test starts, Serie, the legendary sage, holds a meeting with the exam proctors to give them a hard time for letting someone as powerful as Frieren take part in the test and help so many mages breeze through to the final round. She feels that a lot of the weaker mages got this far not because of their own power but just thanks to Frieren. If any of them end up in the real third test, some could really get hurt. To stop that, Seria asks Lernan, a talented guy, for permission before naming herself the new proctor for the last test. But for this new test, Seria promises to keep it chill and go with her gut instinct. Then she lets Lernan chime in shortly after, and he tells her that he doesn't stand a chance against Frieren anyway, since he can tell she's been holding back her mana to trick people and demons. Seria grins at the shy guy and asks the others if they noticed the same thing about Frieren. A bunch of them say they didn't think she was doing that because her mana seems steady. If she was, then she must have spent a lifetime mastering that tough skill. Seria smirks and informs everyone that Frieren has dedicated most of her life to learning how to hide her mana so she can fool both demons and people. Given all the time Frieren had to learn different spells, she could seem weak, yet she still manages to take down a lot of demons each year. That means her mana control is super sharp. For Lernan to pick up on that, it shows he's really talented. Seria then gets up, teasing the old man for being so shy till the end. She pretends to regret taking on human students since they seem to die way too easily. Plus, it's Lernan's modesty and humility that she really dislikes, because she thinks those qualities kept him from facing worthy opponents in his life. After leaving the meeting, Seria heads to the interview room to get ready to interview the contestants. When Frieren hears that Seria is making the picks, she immediately thinks the childish sage is going to mess it up, since she hasn't become the mage Frieren hopes she would be. But honestly, Frieren doesn't care what Seria thinks about her anyway. When the test kicks off, the first contestant, Laufin, comes in for the interview. Before Laufin even gets far in the pretty room, Seria sees right through her and fails her on the spot. Laufin asks why she did that, and Seria breaks it down for her. After failing about 4 more students, Seria finally gets to interview Frieren. She gives Frieren a shot to show she's top-notch mage material by asking her what her favorite spell is. Frieren answers that it's a spell to create a field of flowers. This just annoys Seria even more, and she immediately fails Frieren. Frieren shrugs it off and walks out. Before she can get too far, Seria calls her back and asks how she could take down the Demon King with such a laid-back attitude. Frieren says she didn't do it alone, and names the other 3 heroes who helped defeat the Demon King before drifting into yet another annoying flashback. In this one, Himmel and Frieren are chatting about why Himmel picked her as their mage for the mission. Himmel shares the story of when he first met her back when he was younger. One night, he got lost while picking herbs in the forest and decided to give up getting home. Just then, Frieren, the lone elf, showed up and pointed him the way to his village. Before he left, she created a stunning field of flowers that caught Himmel's attention back then. She tells Seria that she got to know amazing people just because she cast that spell for Himmel when she was younger. By then, Frieren leaves after warning Seria to watch out for Fern's skills, but Seria just scoffs. When Fern finally comes into the room, Seria isn't really impressed at first, but then she gets curious and asks Fern what she can see. Fern becomes the first mage ever to notice the shifts in Seria's mana. Seri instantly falls for Fern and pleads with her to be her student. Fern says no so many times that Seria just feels let down. In the end, Fern calls herself Frieren's only student and lets Seria decide from there. Eventually, Seria moves past Fern and on to the next contestant. Soon, Seria runs into Denkin, whom she thought was just some old dude without any spark or ambition. But after analyzing his thinking and guts, she realizes she was totally wrong and gives him a pass on a whim. The next person up is Yubel, and she just passes her without a word. Yubel is shocked because she didn't expect to get past so quickly. But hey, a win's a win, so she takes her victory and leaves. Then Lan shows up and introduces his clones to Serie, which really irritates her because he's not taking the first-class exam seriously. Lan tries to play it cool, but Serie calls him out, saying his real body hasn't even left his hometown since the test started. She even predicts what he's doing right at that moment, leaving Lan surprised, since even Ubel couldn't figure that out. But Serie appreciates his guts and gives him a pass. Next, she faces Werble and asks him a few questions to see how he thinks. Once she hears the answers she wants, she happily passes him. Methode is the last contestant, and she passes too because she said the right things. When the test wraps up, Serie apologizes to Sense for being rude earlier. Contrary to what she thought before, most contestants are actually first-class material. Hours later, the ones who failed are feeling down and thinking about training for the next tests over the next 3 years. As Frieren and Fern head out of the building, Denkin calls out to them and thanks Frieren for helping him earn a title since it'll make visiting a certain grave way easier. The next day, Stark takes Fern to a snack shop where she struggles to choose a snack she likes. Once she finally picks one, Laufen shows up with Denkin, and it turns out they both like the same snacks. To avoid any drama, Denkin buys more snacks for both girls and sits down to eat with them. Stark feels a little awkward about the whole situation but asks Fern who the old man is. When Stark realizes he's an Imperial mage, he freaks out and apologizes for being so casual earlier. Denkin assures him it's cool and shares a bit about his late wife and not having grandkids, saying he sought magic and power just to save her. But by the time he found out about the Continental Association of Magic, it was already too late. He tells Fern he always thought of magic as a way to settle fights, but Frieren reminded him how fun magic can actually be. He tells Fern to thank Frieren, but Fern tells him to do it himself. Meanwhile, Frieren is randomly picking books at the library and walking around when she spots an old woman struggling to keep her stuff up on her stall. Werble shows up to help the woman, and then calls out Frieren for ignoring her. Frieren flips the convo on him and tells him he looks like a killer. Werble agrees and then shares his backstory, mentioning he got this good by listening to the boring hero tales about Himmel that were a big deal in his village. When he was younger, he'd get mad at his friends for just telling him those boring stories instead of the epic stuff. But as he grew up and saw more demon attacks, he came to realize those big tales didn't actually relate to their village since everyone has their own lives. When Frieren asks what he's getting at, he says he's just pointing out he's in this situation thanks to all the stories he's heard about Himmel. With that, Werble stands up feeling accomplished and leaves to hang out with his friends. Before disappearing from view, Werble tells Frieren to enjoy her time with people since death isn't the only goodbye that exists. After he leaves, Frieren remembers another moment with the heroes, Himmel and the gang. This time, Himmel was spouting some philosophical nonsense about herding sheep. After that annoying trip down memory lane, she returns to the inn and finds out Fern has been invited to the association building to get her first-class mage privileges. Since she can bring guests, she decides to take Stark and Frieren with her. Unfortunately, when they arrive, the trio learns the hard way that Serie has banned Frieren from entering the building for the next 1,000 years. Frieren asks the receptionist what she did to deserve this, but Fern figures Serie must be really upset with Frieren for not following the path she expects of her. So, Frieren and Stark end up spending the whole evening outside waiting for Fern to finish her stuff. Later that night, Frieren tells Stark how proud she is of Fern for reaching that level, and she's stoked Fern finally hit that peak in magehood. Just then, Lernen shows up and apologizes for Serie. When Frieren looks closely, she notices the old mage picked up on her mana changes. She praises him and calls him a war hero from a peaceful time. Lernen agrees, mentioning that's also how Serie sees him. He thinks if he hadn't been born in such a chill era, he might have become a way stronger mage. Right now, he doesn't want Serie to be alone after he's gone, so he plans to attack Frieren to make sure his name is remembered by his master forever. Before Frieren can say anything, he attacks her and injures her soldiers. Keeping her cool, Frieren tells him that Serie clearly has feelings for the students she's trained and has never regretted choosing them. After another memory flashback, Frieren leaves the loser to join Fern, who just learned her new spell. After watching her go, Lernen realizes something new about his master and figures out she loves him just like he loves her. The next day, Stark says his goodbyes to his new friends at Oberst and joins his peers to start their journey to Ende. As they leave the city, Frieren figures out Fern's new spell that cleans clothes. She praises her student for getting such a handy spell and asks if Serie was mad about her getting something so boring. Fern says Serie was pretty mad, but they both don't care. Before they can get too far, Lewin and Can show up to say goodbye to Frieren. After a quick farewell, the trio keeps moving, and Fern asks why Frieren didn't say anything special to the girls before leaving. Frieren says it's because it would feel awkward if they met again. As expected, she backs this up with another memory flashback from Himmel.